But what if we actually did run away? An unthinkable present.
Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero Podcast. I'm your host for today, Kyles McGiles. Today we'll be discussing and analyzing the Sloth and RemIF from ReZero. Me and my wonderful co-hosts will be heading straight into this, but first, introduce yourself, gentlemen.
All right, I guess we're not going the same order as normal. Hi, I'm Connor Palazard. I'm the voice of Julius for our Arc 5 and Arc 6 coming up web reading. Or web novel reading.
Good try. Good try.
Sorry, it's later than normal.
Nobody's fault. Nobody made it later than normal.
Yeah, no, it's fucking fault.
I'm Gold, and I totally got here on time. And also, I voiced Roswell. Hey.
Hey.
Felix and another mysterious character, because we're not going to do necessarily spoilers for this arc up to the anime. So yeah.
And,
hey, I'm the normal host for the podcast, Wolf. I voice Subaru in our Arc 5 web novel readings, and I'm also a total ReZero nerd.
Oh yeah, I'm Amelia.
Amongst others.
Yeah,
amongst many others.
I've probably voiced every single female character in this goddamn show. Anyways, I'm Amelia. Lads. Today we're talking about my girl, my everything, my love, Rem. So I guess, Do you guys want to start with first impressions overall on Sloth IF, RemIF? This is my first if, by the way.
Yeah, well, you know what? First I want you to speak on your Rem fanaticism, because I think it's unparalleled.
Honestly, that's a good start for all of us, yeah. So Go ahead, Miss holding a Rem plush.
I love Rem. I would give my soul for Rem. This is everything for me. I would argue I could have a million more pages of this if I could. Fuck the main series, honestly. I just want more with Rem. I'm so fucking thirsty for her. It's been so long. We've had a drought. I'm only on Arc 6. I need more. Early Arc 6. No spoilers, friends. Wow, what could I say? Everything about this was amazing. Rem is everything I thought she was and more. And she is beautiful. And I'm in love. And I wish I could knock her up myself. I understand. But Subaru needs to fucking get off of her. He needs to get off of her. She's mine.
My goodness.
And,
you are
wow.
dreaming if you think he is on top. But
we'll get to that.
I am also a giant Rem fan. I'm typically the Rem defender, or at least Rem getting knocked unconscious for the rest of the show, Rem defender. On the podcast, I love her a lot. This is not my first if. This is not my first Sloth if. I read this before I even read Arc 5, Arc 6, Arc 7. And it's part of the reason why I love her so much, because this is my main experience with her after the anime was jumping pretty much straight into this. And I've held on to those feelings for the version of her that she starts as, grows into, and ends up as in the Rem and Sloth if stories.
All right, now for the haters.
Haters? That's a strong word. Can I hate something that I don't care for? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Don't kill me. Do not kill me, please.
You know I brought a sword on this episode, right?
Oh,
it's
good
right
heavens.
Here.
Oh, no.
I have ice brand arts somehow. It's in one of my toggles.
RBD. Oh, noisiness.
Yeah, now on to the haters.
So, I do not hate Rem. I do not dislike Rem.
Fuck.
I'm just not a Rem stan. Rem is not my favourite. She's not even close to my favourite. I still love her. I still think she's great. I'm just not a fanatic. Her sister, on the other hand, I could read a RemIF any day. Come on. To pay, you know you have to.
Are you a masochist?
What I will say is that... Shut up. This was a really, really fun if. Especially because... So I read some of the Sloth IF. I think just after I finished reading Arc 4 of the web novel, and I was like, oh, I really enjoy some parts of this, but there's just some parts that weren't grabbing me at the time. But now reading it again recently, I think it's come much more into my reading tastes. It was a really fun slice of life thing. lots of cool world building, lore, and culture shit, which we are just gonna go off about in this episode. There's so much cool world building in this if that I'm really excited to talk about. And it was very cute. I won't lie, not a Rem stan, but it was adorable. And I think it's raised Rem's ranking for me by, like, 1 or 2 places.
Damn.
Yeah, and as for me, I wouldn't say I'm a Rem hater. In fact, I like Rem quite a bit in terms of what she provides to the story. But actually, up to a certain point, I've always kind of felt intrinsically that she as a character is like a necessary evil rather than an actual character. And that was always sort of the feeling in the back of my head, which I understand why people like her in a sense because of all that she does for the love in the story and whatnot, and how cute and loyal she is. But I always kind of felt like there was something missing from her as like a character, as a person at a certain point, because the sort of wholly devoted person over just like one event, I was just like, it makes sense in some ways, but it's a bit too much in other ways. And I was that dissonance always kind of lay over me at large. I was like, this is just for the progression of the story rather than a good character arc, right? Is what I was thinking. And then, that being said, maybe this story changed my mind a little bit, but we'll see.
Gold knows what's missing from Rem is me, so just is what it is.
I do want to speak on the kind of one-noteness of Rem as she is specifically in Arc 3 and in the Frozen Bonds OVA, which is played up for laughs, obviously, in that specific instance. But with what she was available to do and how deep and how far she had to go for Subaru emotionally at that point was needed because she was being taken out as a visible character right after that. So they had to make sure that they were getting everything they needed from her and needed Subaru to get from her in a much smaller time frame than we get with anything else. Like, we effectively have had more time with Garfield than we have had with Rem at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
You are indeed correct.
And that relationship between them is not nearly as deep as it is between Subaru and Rem. He hasn't had like a full love confession with Garfield. Just we're little bros and we're going to have each other's backs for a while. Whereas her effect on the story is still felt all the way, like, just continuously. It's such a major point for him. So getting to see her evolve and move beyond just, you're incredible, Subaru, you have all my respect 3 times in 10 minutes, to someone that can fight back against him, has her own wills, her own desires, can have her victories over Subaru and not just give in to him on every single point, is the version of Rem that I have always spoken about when we have the discussions of pre-Arc 4 Rem versus any other instance of the character that exists. Which I didn't realize was the version that I had been thinking of in any defense point up until I went back and reread through this.
Honestly, valid.
I'm a pink-haired maid defender, enjoyer.
Yes.
But also, I will say that is exactly right. I think that this Rem, and we'll get to it more because I'm going to have a whole spiel about it. But basically, it's like, there's a certain parity to, an evenness to the relationship in this that doesn't exist in the main story, which makes sense because I think there wasn't really that much room for it at the time. But the way that developed here made me see her more as an actual person than somebody just kind of cheerleading Subaru instead.
What I like to hope, at least, is the case, is that this is the version of the character that Tappei was writing from the beginning. Just Subaru wasn't aware enough, or the even narration just wasn't focusing on that further aspect of her, because it was more concerned with getting Subaru from the From Zero to From Zero properly, which rightfully so. So if this is the version of Rem that he always had in mind and was writing, that just makes all of Arc 2 and 3 for her just that much better for me.
I can't disagree with anything that's been said here.
Nope. I love this Rem. I miss her. I want her back. I want her back now. Yesterday even. And I like that Rem. I want that Rem back. I'm nervous from what I've heard spoiler-wise. I want my Rem back. That's my Rem. Sloth if Rem. I can fix her.
She doesn't need to be fixed. That's the whole thing with
That's
Sloth
true.
if Rem.
That's true. She doesn't need to. She can fix me. She can fix me.
She ends this story in a happy, committed relationship
does.
with a family that supports her enough to get her over her own self-doubt issues, even as long as it takes. She
I
is
know.
as
And-
satisfied and healthy as she could be.
She is so perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We'll get to the ending later on as well, like
Yeah.
how the
Ooh,
story ends is
yes.
actually interesting.
Yeah.
But I think because of that, let us start properly chronologically with the story. Let us illustrate the setting
From zero.
from zero.
Thank you.
Well, before we actually get to that, what is
Oh, yeah,
the if that's happened here?
Oh yes.
Gold?
Where do we start off from? Zero.
What's the divergence point for this story?
Blah, blah, blah. That's on you, Gold.
Yeah, so the divergent point of the story is very, very simple. We all know episode 17 of ReZero, right?
18.
It's 18? Okay, well, I messed up
Probably.
the number.
You have
So we
such
don't all
wonderful
know.
fingers.
Yeah. And that episode, with the huge, lovely Rem rant about how much she loves Subaru and how, they could live a life in Kararagi, and I'm sure that they could have children together, and one would be a boy and one would be a girl, ideally, and one might be feisty because they're half Oni, and I would have my education, and you would need to, do, something to kind of prove yourself, but I'm sure you can manage it, and all of that sort of ranting that Rem does in her ideal of running away with Subaru to escape all the responsibilities culminates in this Sloth if. And that is the concept behind the story. What if they did run away? What if Subaru took her up on her offer happily with a smile, as she said in that little thing that she said? What would happen?
Delight is what happens. Yes. So our
Yes.
start is Subaru rejects Rem's impassioned plea for him to not give up. And I'm assuming just asked her again, saying, like, I'm leaving. I want you to come with me. And she is going to agree because she's going to go with him, even if it's not the way that she wanted to go. Because we start off with them on their way to Kararagi, and Subaru is clearly devastated by his decision to leave them all behind.
Fuck him, I
the-
say. Sorry.
We meet a little dog person who kind of just consoles them on their way, and then we jump ahead a little bit less than a year into their life now in the Kararagi city-states. We're getting to get some really cool lore about this other nation that we haven't really gotten
Yeah.
before or anywhere else. It kind of exclusively lives here in the RemIF. And this first chapter being titled 2 months. Wonder what that means.
I wonder.
Yeah. There's do I just say it now? Yeah, but basically the concept behind a lot of the chapters in this is a timeline, right? So you periodically check in, and I think it's kind of clever, right? I haven't seen him do something like this. I mean, obviously you can't really do it in the main story, but it's like a nice, like, oh, we're just kind of zooming ahead, right? We're just saying, okay, here's some of the most important parts of their journey, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of
also-
highlighting it.
It's also foreshadowing the main
Yes, the main
conflict of
conceit,
this
yeah.
of the series for
Yeah.
Rem, at least, in that these month times are her progression through her pregnancy here. Like, her
Get
first
on!
bout with Subaru. Which the timing on it is a little funky because it goes like starts at 2 months, then hits to 10, and then it says final. I'm assuming that
It's
that
within a
is
few
probably
days.
true, but it is still. It's a weird way to describe it, to go like 10th month of pregnancy, final month of pregnancy.
Well,
when
I
that
think we
kinda
figure
implies
out
they get to
why
11.
it's like that,
Mhm.
and we'll get to that later because there's an actual reason why it's like weird like that, and we'll get to it.
One thing I will mention when we're on the subject of how time is displayed differently in this story to how the main story is told to you. I really enjoyed that aspect of this. If there's one thing that I really enjoyed about it, it's the progression of time with these characters and seeing them over a long period of time. It's just something you do not get in the main story.
Mhm.
And it's really cool seeing them build their own roots in a community over like an early young adult lifetime. It's really, really interesting.
Well, we don't get to have that super often because Subaru doesn't get to live for longer than days or weeks or a month at a time.
And then the one time he lives for a year, we get nothing.
Yeah, we skip the year.
Yeah, there's a remark in at one point where Subaru's thinking about his guilt for leaving, which we'll get more into later. But I specifically wanted to address him noticing that this is the easier path for him. And when I was reading that, especially as I've been reading further ahead through the web novel, can I just say, that's just fucking evil to pay put that there.
It's really cruel what Subaru has to go through normally. And this is a nice relief that it almost feels like it's rewarding him for giving up in a weird way.
Yes.
We'll talk about
it
that
does
later.
all work out.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
So this isn't ever properly addressed in the story, and I wanted to ask everyone here now. Do you think Subaru and Rem's decision to leave resulted in the death of Rom, Amelia, Roswell, the rest of the village, and everyone at the manor?
Well, you know what? What's very weird about the story is that it seems like the world doesn't go into disarray because of his absence, if that makes sense. It's not like there's any like moment where they're like, there's weird stuff going on in Lagunica and everything's going awry. It makes me think that maybe they go down a darker path, the selection or whatever. But I think it kind of slyly implies, I don't know how to feel about it, that like without even Subaru there, maybe, you know, Amelia goes down a darker path, but it's not like she's helpless. It's not like, you know, it's not like something crazy happens in the kingdom that shatters all whatever. I mean, what do you think? If Roswell has this prophecy and knows that the world is sort of over, does he just let Amelia die? Because he's thinking, well, he's not coming back, so I guess I'll just let the witch cultists attack and kill Amelia, and who cares? But then it doesn't happen because we know that it can't happen because Puck would come out and destroy the world, or try to.
That was going to be my argument for why at least Amelia lives, because whether Puck comes out and tries to destroy the world or not, we know from the unthinkable future that the events that would have progressed is that Reinhardt would have had to come and stop him with an attack that simultaneously destroys and then recreates the world, which would have killed Subaru, triggering a return by death.
Yeah, so in this scenario, I honestly think that somehow Roswell or somebody else swoops in and takes Amelia down a darker path or something like that.
Go ahead.
So my theory regarding this is actually involving Ram. I think Ram sensing that Rem like left the country with their synesthesia, it triggered like something in her to make her act differently from all the loops we see from Subaru's perspective in the main story. And that has led to that divergence.
I also think. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, that's basically what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Also coming up with like what we talked about earlier and all the stuff that's come up too. I mean, like without Subaru there, a lot of the like season 2 stuff doesn't happen with Roswell. He's not obsessed with the gospel. Betty's not trying to get out of the library because she's not confused at the moment. She's still in her gospel. Like you said too, like we don't see Puck coming out of nowhere. Yeah, I think we would have Rem freaking out because it seems like they could sense if one of them dies overall, regardless of what happens. Not to mention as well is with Arc 5, like we could talk about that since what we do. Would Anastasia have any reason to call up the Amelia camp if the original reason they were called was for the rocks to save Rem?
Anastasia would find a different reason to draw.
I guess that's true.
I believe.
But she only decided to do that all because Subaru had established the alliance between them and they could work together.
That is a good point.
So without Subaru, he kind of sets him up for a lot of bad stuff, unfortunately. But not out of his fault.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too long on this. My suspicion is Krush and her camp were probably fogged out by the whale and just eliminated out from it. Reinhardt may have had to go in with Felt to deal with it. And because of the witch cult attacking on the village outside of Roswell's manor, showing that Amelia is incapable to do it, Felt takes an easy and early win and breaks down the government so that they don't have the communication to make it to Kararagi.
Ooh. That'd be
Well,
interesting.
I do
Different
wonder,
theory.
and people, I think there's probably a whole bunch of stuff that we're not being talked about just because Tepe thinks it's not important for this. But you're right. There's a lot of like, what's going on in the rest of the world? Because what we know from the main story is like there are events that are happening and have to happen that Subaru's involvement with completely solves, and without him, how does it get resolved? You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I think there's sort of a lot of sly implications throughout the story about
Hmm.
what happens or what doesn't happen, and we can talk about that as they come up.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I will mention that I have a couple theories about like because this is a dual-handed thing of Tepe doesn't have to write any of this extra world-building stuff for Lagunica if he doesn't add the details. But one thing I thought about is what if Subaru and Rem have been avoiding trying to learn what happens in Lagunica as well because they're concerned about
100%.
the consequences of them leaving.
True.
So that could be a way Tepe is saying that their guilt isn't making them avoid trying to learn anything about the people they used to be close to in Lagunica.
Because it's not like there's ever a moment where they're like, what happened with Amelia? What happened to Ram? It's not
Yeah.
really like a thing
Yeah.
that they avoid it like pretty obviously.
There's
throughout
like
the
it's
story.
two
it's a-
moments where it comes up and they immediately switch.
It becomes both of their biggest points of insecurity within the story, which I think makes sense. But that's my one reasoning. My other could be that this isn't like exactly a fully thought out what if in the same way a lot of the other ifs are.
Yeah, that's what
And
I was
it's
gonna say.
more a dream of what Rem wanted for her life.
Yeah, because
And I love
what
it.
ends up, how the story ends up, makes me think that that's probably more true than the other ones, where it's like this isn't about, this is just as much about Tepe liking the characters so much that he wants them to have one happy moment beyond, you know, it being a sort of cruel lesson about shirking your responsibilities. It's like it's playing both at the same time, which is sometimes to its detriment, but we'll get to that at the end of the story. But it's sometimes for its positives too, because if you just take this alone as just like, and then, but it kind of ruins a bit of the. If you take it at face value, it ruins just a slight bit of like the main stories thing, where it's like everything's sort of fine without Subaru somehow. It's yeah.
I think that would be true if it was only the Sloth IF, which is the first EX1 chapter in the document that we used here, where it's like him chasing the kid around the park, and then Rem shows up as an unnamed character until it reveals that it's her. For a while, that was just, this is like a dream. It's like, hey, what if they got together and like went off and had a happy time together? But Tape's decision to go back and write out their first, or I guess their second year alone together, which is when Arc 5 is taking place.
Oh.
I think
that's
that's
true.
only going to be happening if he did consider like this is the way that events can go, and had a plan in mind for the way that it could have gotten to the other state. But then again, a lot of those EX chapters end up being impossible to have in the same canon because characters aren't aging through them properly. So
Yes.
it's a situation where I'm going to take that the RemIF is a quote-unquote canon progression for that's how things would go. Whereas the Sloth if point is not necessarily in that same vein, but it is
Ooh.
still where they would end up if they were able to get there.
And
Oh no,
I
that won't
think
work.
going forward with that, we should probably move on a bit because I think we've been onto this subject for a bit too long.
Yay!
There's still a lot we have to talk about.
Okay, so
Yeah.
well, I desperately want to talk about how fucking casual they are about the lewd. Out of all the
Well,
stuff I've read for ReZero, I might
yes,
be
I
skipping a little
was-
ahead, but
I was literally gonna be like, this is the horniest the story's ever been. I don't know
Well, it's
why,
shit, get off
about-
of her!
It's a story about Oni who have horns, so it's going to be horny.
Horny Oni.
Like
Yeah.
actually, like it's incomparable to the rest of the story to a point where I'm like, what was Blood on? You know, what
How-
was Tepe thinking when he was writing this?
Dog was
'Cause, like,
horny.
Well, yeah, but literally also it's like the main story never has a moment where any characters say anything like this ever.
Yeah.
You know, they don't imply anything like this ever, which is like
They
weird. I'm
do.
like,
very, very uncommonly and spread out, but it does happen on occasion. Like I remember when we were doing the Arc 2 readings, it did come up, and that was like a really
True.
weird tone shift for there.
Well, yeah,
And
that was
it
Arc
comes up
2,
a bit
yeah.
in like Arc 6, web and light novel as well.
Mhm.
And some more later down the lines with some of the other characters further on. But it's very inconsistent, and I believe I would say the reason for that is the main heroine that Subaru is interested in thinking about for all that time is not someone that Tappei or Subaru feel super comfortable sexualizing like that. Whereas with Rem, it's very much something that she is aware, she's intelligent, she's educated, she knows everything that's going on, and
She
has
down to
the
fuck.
power in the relationship. So I don't want to say it's fine to have over-sexualized her, but to have made her a sexual character, I think is totally like in line with the way that she would have been.
It feels right, in the story. I don't think it's a moment of me being like prudish, where I'm like, oh, how dare they have all this weird sexual stuff. It's more like
sex.
yeah, and the real thing is like, you're right. It makes sense why Subaru doesn't think bad about Amelia and stuff like that in the main story, but it's also just the absence of it from any other character that makes me think that like the tone of the story was decidedly against talking about stuff like this directly, up until this point, which feels like, yeah, you're right. I mean, they are the same in a lot of ways. That are very even in the story, to a point where I feel like Tappei was like fine with that dynamic enough where he was like, yeah, sure, why wouldn't they be talking about this? This is natural, which is the side of Tappei's writing that I haven't really seen before, because I think he's kind of very visibly avoided topics like this, like sexualizing his characters at all, and at least up till the recent stuff. So I think like, yeah,
it probably helps that he's because some of this content has come out more recently than some of the other content for this compilation that we've read, and it does make me think that Tappei was at this point in the story more comfortable with his characters enough to know what they would be like in this scenario.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas,
That's
especially
true.
as he's writing through arc 1 to 4, it's a very short time period compared to the rest of his writing.
I mean, even if we look at the first thing of this released, which is the Sloth IF, that kind of first EX chapter where they're in the park together, the furthest they go is kiss, and like there's
With
like
tongue.
one casual, right? But there's one casual reference to their nightlife together.
Casual? They tell the kid to go have a fucking sleepover. Mommy and Daddy want a bone.
Well, they just say he's going to stay at his friend's house tonight, which is a casual reference to what they're doing. That is the most casual thing you can do out in public, is to say it like that. But
Rigo,
that's as far
please
as
go
that.
hang out with your friends tonight. We got stuff to do.
Right. But that's all that first chapter does. Whereas this RemIF covers their actual life together, where she is pregnant, an unavoidably sexual topic. And it makes total sense for that to be a more major part of their story here.
True.
I mean, it's even referenced in that other, like, the second half of this story, where Subaru mentions that he's older now and he's not as interested in these things as he was when he was younger, as is Rem. And Rem is the one that is more initiating, which I think was a really fun, like, way of progressing how Subaru would change as he ages. But yeah, that regardless of that,
well, my my big thing there was the just before, I guess this will bring us into the next thing. Just before Tia Natia comes in and attacks them, they're literally coming back from the Subaru's workplace. She's in a borrowed kimono, and he's like, "Oh, come on, can we do stuff?" She's like, "No, I borrowed it." And he goes, "Just a little?" And then she breaks and goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll fuck in the kimono. Why not?"
Yeah, well, there's like, we're getting a bit, but like, honestly,
Sorry, I'm
like,
derailing.
yeah,
No,
I know. You have
It's fine
a
to jump
honest
around. We'll have
reason.
the sex discussion here, and
Yes,
then
exactly.
we'll be
Yeah,
able to
we're
go
gonna
over
get out of
a
my
little more.
system.
Picture this. Yeah, get it out of your system. The idea is that, like, I think there's at least, you're right, like, what was surprising to me was that there's at least, like, it's not the fact that there's, like, 1 or 2. There might be at least, like, 8 times where they're like, we just want to bone so much. Oh, but we can't. And then it's like, oh, but wouldn't it be great if we did it? Oh, but we just can't.
Just gotta
Oh,
keep
but-
ourselves happy in the
Yes,
evenings.
exactly. Yeah,
Fuck.
It's
like,
implied their marriage's success relies on them having sex once a night.
Yes,
At
I
one
mean
point.
that's what Subaru said.
I don't know why they were shocked. They shouldn't have been shocked. They don't have the divine protection of, fucking birth
Bedroom
control.
Wiles.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
his
that
pull-out
one, yeah.
game is weak, I guess. I don't know what to
Yeah,
tell you.
Subaru has no pull-out game.
I don't remember
Teenage
if this was
pregnancy
mentioned.
unlocked.
I don't remember if this was mentioned in this story or if this is from elsewhere, but I was under the impression that her race had a very difficult time conceiving. Like, it was extremely uncommon.
Yeah. I mean, we get to Oni's pregnancy later on, like what
She's
they
fertile
say
as
about it.
fuck.
I
Yeah,
think
I mean-
it's also a thing of, right, like, this is just a trope with a lot of powerful fantasy races, right? Where, like, elves in a lot of stories, like, have a very low fertility because of how powerful they are to kind of, like, balance it out. Because if you were to have, like, humans in a world full of a very powerful race...
There'd be a million elves, yeah.
And they have the same level of fertility, humanity is fucked. Like, let's be real. So I think that is like just a kind of thing you can imply, right?
True, but regardless, it takes him less than a year to get her
Yes.
pregnant. Which, I mean, kudos
once
to
a
them.
night? Yeah, fuck. I mean, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. Let's be real. The first time around, they're probably going multiple times a day to get to one a night. My goodness.
I mean, I think the first time around, Subaru cries for 3 days straight afterwards.
Yes.
Yes. You know what's very funny about it though is that you're right. It's like these two are virgins, right? By the time they get through, and I think that's something that I think about throughout the entire story. I'm like, all of these kids, all the royal candidates, they're presumably virgins, right?
Mhm.
And the real thing is that it's like
Priscilla's been married several times.
yeah,
But she has never
but-
consummated her marriage.
Yeah, she said I would never touch all these old men, right? So that's the thing that she's kind of-
Go off, queen.
Yeah,
Old
Take
men,
the
though.
bag.
Like, she is in control of herself. I'm just saying that is a position.
I
don't
wouldn't
think
be
she is.
surprised, but I think that she's
Exactly.
looking for the
Exactly.
right person. I think it's like the thing where she wouldn't
Understandable.
do it frivolously. And
There's
we
a
haven't
reason
seen
she
her.
keeps Al around.
Well, yeah, that's that too. But also, the
That
thing
elf.
is, I've always been like,
Within an arm.
Priscilla
of
probably
one
has,
wish.
like, never mind. My headcanons of Priscilla being like the bisexual queen is
Oh,
behind
No,
it.
I'm
100%.
here for it.
You
I'm
are
here for it.
absolutely right.
I believe. I do.
Less stiff, but Priscilla's the main MC. I'm here for that.
Oh.
In
me
honesty,
too.
with how well To Pay has handled sexuality and some of the side content, which for those who watch the podcast, you haven't seen this lost episode that we talk about a lot on the podcast, but we did an analysis of EX1, and To Pay does a really, really cool look into some characters' sexuality in a way I was never expecting. So I am much more comfortable with To Pay expressing that with his characters.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that a bit too. There's something interesting, and it's something that almost drives me insane, and it's the inclusion of the stuff about Subaru being feminine, and then Natsumi Schwartz makes an appearance later on in the story, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Like, never mind. It happens he cannot help himself. He mentions this maybe 50 times. Like, any time that like a casual thing happens, Subaru's always like, oh, I'm so feminine, or like it's like, oh, I can't wait to cross dress as Natsumi Schwartz. I'm like, what is never mind, we'll get to that later.
His
I mean,
magical girl transformation into Natsumi.
We did discuss it in that one, but just for the real quick hit on that, every woman in Subaru's life is extremely powerful and capable. So him cross-dressing into a woman will make him feel the same way.
Another thing
Sure.
that is talked about in this arc, which I think was interesting, I'll just bring it up now. Later on the arc, it's pretty much mentioned in Subaru's POV. He's like, it's weird. It feels like Rem is talking about. We were talking about she gets pregnant. She's talking about, I wonder if the baby's going to be feisty, it's going to be a girl. And Subaru's like, a girl. Usually that's what people think about boys in my world. And then it's like, is this world, are women more powerful than men, like socially? And he kind of thinks about it a second, and that evidence seems kind of borne out. And I was like, yeah, that seems about right.
There's like
Transport
almost a
me
point
now!
There's like a point of worship of women in the ReZero world,
Yes.
where they are all highly respected and believed in as like an extremely powerful person. But there is still an element of medieval sexism where when we start, unless they got it through a marriage that ended in murder, or inheriting from a father with no sons, there are no women who are actually in a position of power. It's like a council of wise men exclusively. There's dukes and counts and knights who are all men, and the lords of houses are all men. But all these priestesses who are going to be making this powerful contract, like something of actual physical power, are based on women, and they are seen as this holy figure devoted to this dragon, which even throughout this story, there's a lot of reverence for Rem as, like, she's this amazing person. You're so lucky to have her as a wife, Subaru.
I think it's a really cool thing to pay us down with, like, almost like the culture of this world, where like some of your typical medieval ideas are still used here, but he's implemented a different cultural understanding of gender in this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it has to do with, sorry, I was going to point out, I think it has to do with, if anything, the witches being such a pivotal part of the world, that I think that is one of the things where women get more power in this world by virtue of the things that they've done in like history. Like the idea of witches is a very feminine role, right? So like,
true.
I think that's a part of it. That they are the most powerful like a lot of times women in the story are the most powerful fighters, which is interesting. I mean, a few of them, I mean, the most strongest are all men, but besides that, like a lot of the nobles, a lot of the people, you know, that win in the end are usually women. So I think that's
true. It's very true.
Fuck
and
yeah.
Subaru, as his like feminine side and like the position of women in power, is a great transition to the beginning of our story, where Subaru has lost his job as a delivery boy and needs to go to an unemployment desk to get hired as a maid.
Yay!
Not as a servant, not as a butler, explicitly as a maid.
Maid-sama, Subaru.
And
that's what I was talking about.
We learn through, like, as we get to that part. I'm kind of jumping ahead here because I think this is a great part to talk about it. We learn as he works through this job initially that it's almost like a joke title and done in a way by the employer for this job to amuse his interests with all of the women that work for him. Which is just a really, really funny way to get that across. I'll talk about it more later, but it's very amusing as a concept.
So pretty much, you know, Rem is a teacher in Kararagi at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've jumped a year since they've arrived,
which was so exciting to see.
Teacher Rem makes a lot of sense.
And so fucking hot.
She was employed just because she's so cute, as
she should.
Well, she's also shown that she had full literacy and a proper education.
Yeah, she's the only one in town with literacy skills. Shout out to Roswell.
Exactly. I mean, that's what Rem said before she left. It was like, I've literacy. I got taught a full education because of Roswell. You know, so that's bearing out here. But you know, Subaru can't do anything. But you know, he's kind of teased by this Wolfman Halibel, and about whatever. But he says, "I'll try to find you a job at the board." And he gets acquired to be a maid, and the entire thing here is that he's being a maid of one of the merchants, like the top merchants in the city of Banan, right? Is where they're from.
Yeah.
Yes, they're in the city of Banan, which is the second largest city in Kararagi, which we get a lot of cool details for, including that while it used to be run by, quote, feudal lords, same as the Edo period in Japan, which the architecture and clothing style is based off of heavily, they have since switched to a republic style where the leaders of each town get together into a parliament and then from amongst themselves elect a, the first heir or high heir?
Yeah, something to that degree, yeah.
Which is supposed to imply like the heir to Hoshin, I'm assuming.
Yes.
As like the chosen successor there that rules over the city-states, which are just now the towns of this nation. And honestly, I think that's a really cool difference for how Kararagi works compared to the rest of the world. And I'm glad that we got that little bit of extra information for it.
Yeah.
Another interesting aspect of world building here is we see Subaru consider about the architecture and like the way people dress, that it's like inspired by Japanese culture of the Edo period. and specific other periods, but it's not like a replica. It's like cosplaying, he almost compares it to.
Yeah.
Where it's like inspired by, and he doesn't find it offensive, but he can feel that it's different.
Right. There's subtle points like servants wearing clothes that only nobles would wear, or the names of certain things didn't quite get brought over one to one. The way that people move about or show respect to each other, traditions that aren't being held up or kept. It's very much like someone who really liked Japan made this place up.
Set up
A weeb.
Kararagi.
Yes.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And in talking about Riften here, this man that he's being hired to work for, there's apparently a hierarchy of merchants, and merchants are sort of treated as if they're like a warrior class because of how difficult it is to do business in Kararagi and how well respected it is. That there are like ranks, like you get titles based on how successful you are as a business person. And we'll get to that in a bit. And I used to have a bit more, like I would say that there's an interesting line here in which Kararagi seems, from the outside, a very miserable place. But then there's some people here that treat the greediness and the value and the exchange of goods more as a spiritual philosophy than it is a like a greed aspect of it. And we'll get to that in a second and talk about Riften a bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I was gonna ask real quick, Riften. I feel like I've heard his name before when I read it in the story. Have we?
It's a city in Skyrim. It's very
Yeah,
popular.
it's a city. Yeah, it's a very common name in lots of stuff.
Never mind. Ignore me. Moving on.
And he gets hired, but he gets sexually harassed by all the middle-aged women that work under Riften. And apparently Riften's in denial about liking MILFs, and he just won't admit it. But he's glad that somebody can take the aggro off of him, and that's why he hired Subaru.
We love a good MILF.
You know what? Respect to Riften for just hiring experience over anything else. Like, honestly, the man's kind of based. We can't deny him that.
Yeah.
It's very, very different from the nobles we see in Lagunica.
True.
He is everything you want in a leader, in the sense of he's very down to earth and he's honest with Subaru at every point he interacts with him. Some of my favorite interactions in this these novels, was actually Subaru and Riften's interactions, because Riften is like always down to earth with Subaru. He's always like, yeah, this is how it is. And the only time he's coy is when Subaru calls them out on liking cougars.
Mhm.
Literally, he's straight up like, oh, it's fine. You're an investment. My investment's paying off.
Yeah.
It's fine. You're fine.
That's what I mean for the spiritual aspects. But one other important thing to note here is we actually get a monologue from Subaru while he's thinking about this Japanese culture and like, oh, is other people being isekai? Things like he's inferring, right?
Mhm.
And then he immediately thinks, I can't solve the world's mysteries. I'm poor. I have to go fix that. And
Yeah, he has to go to work.
Yeah.
It constantly
so
gets
it's a
interrupted by
really-
life.
It's a really cool contrast to how in the main story, a lot of it is Subaru piecing together mysteries about the world that he's trying to figure out. And in this story, he doesn't get that luxury because he's not nobility.
Well, it's also in the main story, the very first thing that he does after waking up in the mansion is securing employment indefinitely. Like, he's set from there on. Whereas here, like, his driving goal is, I want to be someone that Rem can rely on. I need a job that's going to do enough to support us, and that I can move forward as a indefinite lifetime career, which is a huge thing in Japan, where you just have your one job forever.
Yeah, which is interesting to me because in this story's conceit, it is the Sloth If, right?
Mhm.
At least that's what it's kind of titled. But Subaru kind of has a very pragmatic approach, and we'll get to what I think Sloth If means in this case, and we'll get to that later in the story because I think it becomes more evident. But like in the moment, it seems like Subaru is actually we're looking at a broken, miserable, sort of awful person. There's a lot of very sympathetic things that we can think about in Subaru's choice to leave. It's almost like Teppei almost respects the pursuit to have. Maybe he just thinks that there's something very pure about wanting to fall in love with somebody that he can't really tarnish too much. It's like what can I blame Subaru for? Wanting to find love and happiness and a family somewhere. Like,
Yeah, so what he
know,
wants to live a normal life. Let him
This
have
is a
it.
thing I think we'll talk more about when we maybe get some more Arc 7 discussions in the future. But I feel like it's an interesting point of contrast to how Takei is criticizing Subaru in the main story.
Mm-hmm. Where his decision to be and just live a simple life is not what's being attacked here.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that Subaru is being challenged for narratively in this is running away from the main responsibilities. And even his pursuit of, I want to find one job I can get that's going to get me supported now and I can work for in the future, I felt was kind of super similar to when he was asking Wilhelm to train him in swordplay, where it was the obvious post in front of him to hit.
Yes.
Where it wasn't him doing the hard thing. So it is, in that sense, still being slothful if he's looking for the easiest answer. But I honestly don't think that's worth being blamed for here. So that's not attacked. It's just part of who he is in having made the decision to leave.
I think the tone of the story, as a contrast to the other ifs, which we won't really I won't mention here too much, but as like a general idea, I think the tone of the story being happier is a indication of what Takei feels like Subaru's sin of sloth is a less intensive than the other sins in terms of like a evil thing almost, right? Like or wrong, if that makes sense.
Because theoretically speaking, there's really nothing he does wrong except for them up and leaving the Amelia camp after they, have gotten so much from them. But honestly, they don't owe them anything. Realistically.
It's a point of analysis too, right? That Subaru is also the sin he is most bathed in before he comes to this world is sloth. He is someone that can't move on in his life. And I think in that sense, Takei is also saying, like, it's a very relatable problem to be a procrastinator, to be someone that takes the easy path, to be someone that doesn't want to take a difficult route, even if it means doing the quote-unquote wrong thing at the time. It's an understandable emotion. But further away from the deeper analysis stuff, this story has some just really fun slice of life moments. We get a cool staging for like how this community goes and how Subaru and Rem fit into it. Subaru's, as we mentioned, looking for work, and on the way to looking to work, he meets his neighbor Halibel, who's the manager of the place that him and Rem stay at.
I was
honestly one of the
I almost
best
forgot.
Characters.
Yes, obviously. I think I like
great.
Halibel a lot.
Who's interestingly, especially for our discussions for other parts of our podcast, he is a wolfman, full true and true wolfman, which is on the verge of extinction, according to him.
He just gotta fuck.
You just gotta thank you for that insight.
Unfortunately, just Halibel does. He's a playboy and it's not working out for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, eternal playboy. Which sounds almost like Wizard, you know what I mean? It's like
he makes that joke in here of like, well, I guess at that point you just gotta hope and pray that it's true and you'll become a sage and just stick on that forever, which I think is supposed to become a wizard.
Yeah, I think that's
you're like
exactly
a
what it is.
virgin at 30.
But I saw that and I was like, when that word comes up in the story, I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a wise man, a wizard, or if
online talk
in English translate that as a wizard wrong already.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Who knows?
Because that is right. Wizard comes from a Japanese sort of sentiment, right? Become 30.
Yeah, that phrase is from Japan.
Yeah. And basically, like, Riften throws a party. Rem's in a lovely. What was she wearing? Yukata, right?
Kimono.
A full kimono.
Modeling a kimono for someone.
And
that they were gonna mess up.
Basically, Subaru, has this conversation with Halibel, his neighbor, who is just like a really, he's a very kind, neighborly person, which is
goofy guy.
Is a goofy guy. He's kind of neighborly, and his like level of care for other people, just like based off of just being nice and helpful around the community, is something that like is almost like there's no shoe that gets dropped throughout the story about Halibel.
Right, he's
in
just
terms of that,
a great guy.
He's just a good guy.
Yeah,
great guy, lazy, and he is their landlord.
Yeah,
and he just follows Subaru around.
One cool thing
doesn't have his own job. Not like that.
Not like that.
one cool thing I want to know about the culture of Kararagi, and also a strength of Subaru that I think really shines in this if, is that Subaru makes connections. Now, the connection that gets them to Halibel and to Banan is a connection Rem makes in that carriage when they're on the way to Kararagi with a demi-human that has that contact with Halibel, which is how they meet. But from that point onwards, Subaru makes a tight relationship with Halibel, and also the lizard man that runs the employment office, Crane. They have a very banterous relationship. He's almost like, oh, fuck, you ruined this job now? What am I going to get for you this time?
Yeah, I mean, he fucked up the job of moving things from one place to another, where he wasn't being judged on how heavy of stuff he was moving, like he thought he was.
And it points to Subaru being able to bring people together. Like, and you'll see this later on in the story with even his job role, which is kind of crazy. But Subaru brings people and communities together. He's a great person for like culture and happiness and making a community happy. He's a good leader in that sense.
He is.
And I think he really shines in this if.
Yeah. One other thing to note while he's at the employment office is that seems to also double as like a standard isekai RPG quest center, where there is a job on the job board posted to go and investigate Zarestia's bed, where someone else has already taken that job.
I would like to lay in Zarestia's bed.
I would too. I
stand in solidarity with that opinion.
I think that is a very dangerous decision, and
Worth it.
Yeah, I'd have to, cover myself in corpses and make sure that I get there properly. But
die!
Yeah, we'll get to there in a second. The interesting thing about this is basically, throughout this sort of scenario, yeah, you're right. There's a job board about it. And that sort of quest thing is, I feel like fits more in Kararagi than anyplace else in the world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. All I could visualize was Goblin Slayer while I was reading this entire thing. It's like they just went...
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's the idea. It's like, I was imagining the Konosuba place that they always go. They have the posters where it's like a bunch of red death stamps all over it, and Subaru has no idea what those mean because he can't read the language.
I was also picturing Baloo from the Jungle Book as Halibel, like the entire time, mixed with Yogi Bear.
Voice for it.
Yeah.
One other point for this kind of beginning of the story that I think is very important for establishing where the characters are on the character level is at this point they're kind of discussing what they want to do for, I think it was for dinner at the beginning. And Subaru makes the point that he's glad Rem is finally giving her own tastes and not just defaulting to whatever he asks for.
Yes.
And she wants sour things.
Getting used to the diet over there in Kararagi.
But also, that's because it's a craving! Because she's Pergamodont.
Yes. But yeah, they leave this party that they rifting through for everybody. Halibel
to go have sex.
Yeah, they're right. They're flirting
at all times.
And then they see a figure standing in the candlelight, surrounding them. Looking at them menacingly. And Subaru's starting to notice bloodlust, coming from this person. And she makes it pretty clear that she wants them to die.
Die! I want you to die!
Right? Yes. Total malicious. In that initial description, where it's just this tall-ish, white-haired, beautiful woman in black, I went into this read knowing who this is entirely. But for those who didn't know who it was, probably mostly you, Kyles.
Me, yeah.
Did you have any initial thoughts for who this might have been at that point?
I thought it was either A. Satella, who just was pissed that he went this route. 2, Capella, because I heard inklings that there could be an Arc 5 spoiler. 3, Shala. For whatever reason, I was aggressively believing that Shala could appear. I don't know why. She can't leave the watchtower. So, and then 4 was Amelia, when I saw white hair and an Amelia clone or something. Or she just wore black because she was pissed.
Yeah, and one of the things about this is that you're right. I was expecting in the story there would be a moment where a reckoning would come, where like his past would come up to catch him. So you're right.
Yeah.
I initially was like, there has to be consequences. A witch cultist has to come, a
Mhm.
blah 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 has to come and be like, hey, where the heck are you? We have stuff that we need you to do. But that doesn't happen. And
Nah.
to spoil it, but that doesn't happen at all. But instead, we get this white-haired woman, and her story is interesting. Like, I mean, I love this story, anyways,
I love
but
this story.
It's so
uh,
good.
and they make a note of this white-haired, beautiful woman who is wearing all black, but her
Mhm.
face isn't beautiful like traditionally beautiful. It is beautiful like nature itself has sculpted a beautiful stone over hundreds of years of
Mhm.
wear and weathering and whatever.
Biblically
And
accurate waifu.
yeah,
Biblically
biblically
accurate
accurate
waifu.
waifu.
Yeah.
And really, like, she says all this stuff. It says die, 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 right?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
wind is cutting all around her, and it's
I also thought it could be Ram.
that's true, right? The idea that there's a wind goddess that, like, the thing is that that's something that I kind of noted too. I was like, this is almost. I was wondering if they're going to do this, if this was like a representation of the fact that, like, maybe symbolically that Rem left Ram, and this is supposed to be like your sins are catching up for you from abandoning your sister.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Like,
think it's definitely part of it. It is also a retroactive thing where they needed to explain why someone was being trained in wind magic when no one else around him knew it.
I guess that's true.
For the way that this was in release order, Rigel was learning wind magic and needed to have an explanation for
oh,
why he
I
was
didn't know
learning
that. Yeah. My bad.
Oh.
I
Oh,
didn't
that
know
makes
the roots of
sense.
this. Yeah. But
She
yeah,
also. Oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No.
Oh, all I could think of was Hollow from Spice and Wolf. With this character, we'll come back to that. From my
Okay.
very limited knowledge on Spice and Wolf, but
Yeah, and one of the thing is that this is happening, and then Halibel shows up, right? And
Yeah, Subaru's poor defenseless neighbor has arrived. What's
And
what's
then
Yeah,
going
Rem's
on?
like, oh yes, Helabel, the great admirer. I'm like, the fuck? Who?
Yeah, who?
why are you here?
of course, I knew who Halibel was because I was a dirty wiki reader for the fact of trying to
Damn.
get the D&D campaign done. So when Halibel showed up in the story, I was like, yeah, I was waiting for the shoe to drop, right? But I was surprised. He becomes 4 people, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
And
straight up shadow clone jutsu from Naruto.
but he's like, no, don't worry. This isn't me becoming weaker. These guys are the same strength as me, and Rem is like, you're the strongest person in the Kararagi city states, right? And it's like, dang. And it goes and gives a little blurb about this later. It's like,
Mhm.
he is the strongest, doubtlessly in the Kararagi city states, and there is like Reinhard is the strongest in the the
in
kingdom.
the kingdom.
Yeah, and it's like this
Yeah.
is the moment where this sort of like we have to find a strongest for each country
yeah.
happens in Tepe's mind. I feel like he's like, well, I said this guy was the strongest here. I said this guy was the strongest there. I guess I have to keep saying who's the strongest in each. Right?
Yeah.
Well, this was
I-
already established in earlier writings that he had done that it was a Halibel the Great Admirer who was the strongest from Kararagi.
It is funny in that sense of like it's almost like a very an anime or light novel trope, right? Of like, oh, you're the strongest from this area. But Tepe does it almost as like a way to placate the reader of like, oh yeah, this guy, this is the strongest. Think of him in that sense, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Which is really fun. I like the whenever that moment ever happens in the story, Subaru is always like, ooh, interesting.
Why are
He
you
tends to
the
just
strongest?
befriend them, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Where it's just like
Yeah.
randomly walks into them in their everyday job and it's like,
Well-
oh, well, they're pretty cool. Let's hang out.
Tepe does a really cool thing, which I think is one of my favorite aspects for a lot of media, where the really strong people are fucking weird. Like,
Yeah.
just weird
Yeah.
people. And I think that is, like, a really good way to explain how someone could be different, in the sense of they're just a weird person, and that's led them to do something that's made them really strong.
Not to mention as well, they all seem to just know when things are going amiss. Like, they're always there. Reinhardt has that ability to just appear.
That's also
Halbel does too now.
That's also the thing that comes with being a very strong person. Like, you can measure other people's strength. That's like a sign of strength, right?
I mean, if Subaru can feel the burning, killing intent from this person, I'm sure Halbel, who's known as someone that admires, is able to sense it as well.
Yeah.
One interesting thing to note about Halibel's powers, because I'm going to skip ahead a bit here, because he gives us some extra context later on in the compilation. His clone attack thing, where he can have like 4 of himself that attack, is also incredibly risky, because if one of them gets wounded, all 4 that will quadruple the wound, basically. So Halibel isn't a direct warrior in a sense. He's much more a really powerful roguish type character.
Well, there's an interesting thing about Halibel here, which makes me curious, honestly, which is the fact that out of any strongest person that we've met so far in the series, the strongest of the states, Halibel mentions constantly all of his weaknesses, right? And they're more evident than the other characters who are quote-unquote the strongest weakness. For example, Halibel's like, I have to smoke this medicine all the time.
Sure you do, bud.
Yeah. and he's smoking weed all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's what my cousin says
every
too.
Day.
Yeah, he smokes weed all the time. And he's always in this very lax state. And then he has this clone where he's like, it's not perfect, and I can't even do more than 4, really. Like, even if I tried hard, it'd be kind of difficult for me. And it's like all this stuff where I'm like, that's interesting, because it's like, if this guy is the strongest and these clones are fallible in a lot of ways, where it's like, you damage one, you damage them all, then it's like, this guy must be so strong that even despite all these weaknesses in his technique, he's still able to do it flawlessly. Like, we see throughout the story that like he completely makes it so the one of the great spirits can't do anything. Like, that's just sort of his sort of thing.
Yeah, Halibel is the best in Garagi despite his nerfs, whereas like Reinhardt is the best in the kingdom because of his buffs. It's kind of a difference in just their attitude about it as well.
Yes.
As a result of that, it's like Halibel only sees his weaknesses and he has to think about how he overcomes it all, which is very similar to Subaru's end, where he has to figure out the right way to handle the situation. He can't just brute force the fight. Whereas it's the same with Subaru. He has to figure out the way to defeat an enemy. So the Halibel is more direct, where he has to figure out the way to kill the enemy rather than overcome the challenge.
It's important too, because it's a difference in a style of humility, where you can feel from Halibel that his humility is a genuine, I've learned from my failures and weaknesses and I've overcome that in a strength. Reinhardt's humility is false. Like, it's not genuine in a sense of, like, whenever he's humble towards someone, it's more of an insult than it is like a genuine humility. Even if he doesn't mean it that way, that's how it comes across.
Reinhardt is modest. Halibel is humble, which is the difference between them. But he comes in, he kicks ass. He manages to get one of his kunai into this screaming white-haired lady's attack, uses cool shinobi techniques, despite Rem passing out as soon as she tried to sacrifice herself for Subaru again.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's just typical Rem, passing out all the time. There's nothing weird about that.
No, not at all.
But Subaru has to, well, one thing I'll note is that Halibel is talking about the fact that he's a black magic specialist, and this is an interesting thing. I don't think they mean black magic as in yang magic. I think they mean curse magic.
Yeah.
Shamanism.
Curse weapons.
Yeah, shamanism. And interesting enough, they talk about, in another part of this translation, they say sorcery, which is interesting because I know what it means. It's jujutsu, like Jujutsu Kaisen. They're like sorcery because that gets translated as sorcery all the time, and it means shamanism basically. So he's like a shaman, right?
Because jutsu is just technique.
Yes.
So, like for this, it's just he's experienced in magical techniques, which is meant to be what they kind of refer to as curses elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because it is that darker, scarier,
yeah,
not good or not natural magic. It's kind of the context behind the words for it.
And there's like curses that are only meant for killing, and he kind of talks about that. I mean, we know that in the northern provinces you get taught that. Also, him being a shinobi is funny. We'll talk about that a little bit later. He talks
Yeah.
about the shinobi villages and how they're kind of, scattered about. And Kawaragi Suisei seems strong, but is it stronger than shinobi village? I don't know.
It is if Hannibal is there.
Yeah, exactly.
True.
But yeah, he basically says there's a long story to my past. For now, just think of it as one less thing to worry about. We don't get his full past in the story. I wonder if we're going to meet him in the main story at some point.
I
We're
hope
going to
so.
learn about him because he seems really cool.
I can say with a 90% certainty, I'm sure we'll see him.
I miss him
Maybe
already.
Anastasia's arc has us going back to Kawaragi because it feels more fleshed out than I initially thought it was. I'm like, maybe this place would be cool to go to at some point. That's what I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
All I'll say is that there's a reason that I said that we needed to hit the Rem and Sloth ifs before we got to the later arcs. So I'm not going to say what that reason was, but I did insist on us doing this before we finished 7.
Okay.
How the?
It gives a lot more insight into Rem as well. As I said
love
before,
her.
they made me like Rem, like pre-Rem, and not in a way where I thought her character was just a plot device. And the reason I think it is because Subaru and Rem are on equal footing here. And the story actually involves her emotions as a person rather than using her emotions to then justify his growth away from, and also helps him go away from just being coddled by her. You know what I mean? Like this story is not about, Rem, helping Subaru no matter what, no matter how bad of a person he is. That's part of it, but they both realize that they need to. I mean, Subaru in this story realized that he needs to provide for her and realized that he has to do something outside of her. And Rem realized that she can speak her mind outside of just trying to appease Subaru. And I think that makes me understand her character more as like a regular person. So I think that's nice. But yeah, Rem is unconscious and they're taking them to a doctor. And
notably a healer, which I thought was interesting that Kawaragi has.
Right. The idea
our conversation with our earlier podcast episodes.
Yes. One interesting thing to note here is Halibel feels comfortable enough. We learn later because Halibel has a really good sense of smell from being a wolfman, so he uses that information to kind of like how he navigates Subaru and Rem through a lot of problems. And he tells Subaru, take Rem home, I'm gonna go get a healer for her. And Subaru does that. Halibel says, you should be comfortable and fine with doing that. Subaru takes Rem home, and then he sees the door move and open, and he's like, oh, so, the healer that Halibel has ordered has come in. And it is someone that looks exactly like the woman that just attacked him. Just wearing white instead. She announces herself as a Shinigami instead of just spamming die, die, die this time. And literally just beats the shit out of Subaru.
The air also doesn't drop when she arrives there like it did when the one in black showed up.
Yes.
You know what's very interesting with this scene?
But
in retrospect, it's very hot.
It is very hot.
In the moment, I'm like, this girl is like it's not even like I'm the person who I like, the meaner characters.
You do. Priscilla, Makima.
Just on the merit of me kind of like, think it's hot, but also the idea that they are a lot of times when they're written well and you understand why they're like this, it becomes a lot better. Like you kind of get the understanding of like who they are as characters or why they act the way they do. Initially, even I was like, I think this girl is annoying. Like she's like being bratty for no reason. Like she obviously she was just trying to kill them, and now she's she's being kind of like, I don't want to. I'm not gonna kill you. What's going on? I didn't understand why at first. I was like, is she interested in who Subaru is? That she can't kill him, and that she's just kind of torturing him just because she's like doesn't know how to express her feelings. Like there was like a weird mixture of that. But of course, we understand why that is later, and it's a great reason, and it was a great reveal. So I'm not going to say it now. Yeah. But the sort of idea is that like right now she's just getting beat up, and she's dutifully not killing Subaru, even though she easily could.
Breaking his apartment, though.
Yeah, breaking his apartment, breaking his nose, and he's like rubbing his bloody nose on her, and he's like, "Ew, like you're so gross, get off of me!" And I thought that was kind of cute. I was like,
it's that other thing of like, oh, your body's so sweaty, it's going in the air everywhere. Stop, you gross creature.
There was something very horny about this, honestly.
Oh my god!
So I'm kind of surprised because I just wasn't reading it that way. And it might be again because I have gone through this story before, so I kind of know her whole personality and her relationship to Subaru and Rem and how it evolves. But reading it with that knowledge made it seem exactly like what it kind of turns into, of a much more not playful, because it is still aggressive and violent against Subaru, but the emotions and like the way that they're talking to each other feels much more like she is a small child attacking somebody else.
In retrospective, it's more primal than that, but we'll get to that later. It's just sort of this moment, in Subaru's perspective, there's so much hatred there, right? In Restia's perspective, she doesn't understand like what anything is. Like, she doesn't understand humans well. So really, like, this moment, all that she does, like, there's a lot of like dissonance, right? And
I was confused at that point, honestly.
Yeah, at this point, you don't know any of this, so like for me too, I was like, "What? Like, is she?" She has a lot of hatred, obviously, for the scenario, but she can't kill them, or maybe she's realized. Like, there's a lot of things where she's like, "Give me the." We'll get to that later. She's like, "Give me the light ball, right? Where is it?" And if you don't say it, and they're like, "I don't know what the heck you're talking about, lady. You're crazy." Right.
Well, there was with that, it's like when I was reading it, because I don't know much about this arc. Like, I didn't even know any of the extra characters, really. I've seen pictures before, but that's about it. But I thought she was like similar to how the Sun Archbishops have, like, they're just themselves. Because there's certain ones we haven't seen and stuff. I thought she could have been like somebody representing Satella, but as like a human figure. Because that's why she was saying the opposite of love. She wanted death, but like wouldn't hurt Subaru, but wanted to hurt Subaru. If that's where I was at. And also her hair was white, so I was like, wait, hold on. What is this? She's love Shinigami, huh? That's where my head was at while reading.
And we learned that a lot of the dissonance in her character comes from the fact that it's not her. Yeah.
Right.
So
these are two people.
Yeah, two people. So the fact that this happens back to back, it's like the same person in your mind. If it's the same person, you're like, why are they suddenly like this? It's kind of weird.
It's a great way to pay. Gives you whiplash, just like Subaru got whiplash.
Like, which is good.
I do remember that my initial guess for this, because Rem is such a prominent part of the story, is that this was just another set of twins. Honestly.
Yeah, same.
And that will be like the comparison in the story, right?
Yeah, because there's the one who's beating him, like who's actively attacking him, trying to kill him with wind magic, and the other one who's beating him up but refusing to kill him. It's the same situation as Arc. I thought it was just repeating that.
I remember that too. I think I wrote that down at some point. The idea behind this, though, if I remember the events of this, basically, she's like, "Give me a light ball," right? And they're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Halval comes in, right? And he's like, "Hey, you better stop." And
does it not happen the next day after he goes to work, and she like catches him and she forces him to come back home?
Yeah. So this happens, and she doesn't she just leave once?
So she sees Rem and immediately knows that there's life in her. Because no characters notice at this time. She's a spirit and can immediately sense life like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So she ran away, and then they came back and then announced the news to Subaru while Rem was asleep.
And does she? No, she doesn't explain this yet. But yeah, okay, yeah. So then she leaves, and then they get beat up, and then they send Subaru to the hospital, right?
And
Albert comes in afterwards, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I got outfoxed. My nose usually, would tell me if somebody's here, but I couldn't smell anybody. What the heck? They must have done a good job like losing their scent.
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough. I'm sorry. Again,
Yeah,
with him,
exactly.
like showing that he isn't infallible.
Yeah, exactly. And
He
basically,
learns from that mistake.
yeah,
True.
basically it's interesting that there's a healer here, as we talked about before, like a doctor. And basically, you know, Subaru's like, why are you so nice to us? You know what I mean? To
He's of
Halibel.
course going to be suspicious of Halibel here because he's just found out that he's not been
the
lying to
strongest
him,
person.
but he's had this other side that Subaru never knew about the entire time that they've known him for close to a year now.
But you know, I think Halibel says it now or maybe later, but he's like, Shinobis always have their secrets, and it feels like one of those, you know, I'm super cool moments. He's like, I can't tell you all my secrets.
And then Subaru immediately makes fun of him for it.
Yeah.
And then they get interrupted by the news about Rem.
Yes,
she is
perfectly fine.
Flips.
Yep, just exhausted, and congrats.
Right.
Thinks
He's
it's
like,
a
what are you
name.
talking about? Yeah, he's like, congrats.
On what?
She's fine because of someone named Congrats?
She activated her horn, which made her weak, and she just boop, down she went. Too much power drained.
Because there's another Oni in her that's draining mana.
Ayo. But she doesn't know 'cause she's passed the fuck out, so Subaru has to tell her the next morning. Which that is a whole
not
dialogue.
after he double checks they are going to be able to continue sleeping together. Because their marriage relies on it, supposedly. But
Young
yeah,
and
they
horny,
find out
man.
that Rem is pregnant. And and it's Subaru's kid. I don't know why they kept reaffirming that.
I don't know why. Where else does she go? She literally lives, breathes, eats Subaru.
It's Subaru reaffirming that because he's
no,
I'm a dad.
The doctor says it to Subaru the first time. It's like, she's pregnant with a child.
It's
child.
your
and then
child.
later on, he tells Rem, it's like, you're pregnant
with
my
his
kid.
To be fair, for the context of that doctor, he's literally like, congrats, and Subaru doesn't catch the vibes at fucking all, so he has to directly tell him, yo, by the way,
dumbass.
Dumbass, like, you are father. There's baby in woman. You father.
You did the act, you got the product. Congratulations. No contraception, that's what you get.
And Subaru then takes Rem home. She wakes up in the morning. Subaru tells her about everything. And Rem and Subaru have markedly different reactions to her being pregnant. Subaru is extremely enthusiastic, hesitant because he's still in shock about becoming a father, but he's not nervous about it.
Yeah.
He's like, oh wow, okay. And then I'm like, and then he tells Rem, I will do the best I can to be a good father. And you see that Rem is like, on her face, there's a level of pain almost to her. You don't understand until later why this is, but it's an important thing to mention now. But then Subaru is like, oh, I've still got to go to work. So, Halibel, do you mind watching Rem to keep her safe? And Halibel's like, yeah, sure, dude. I just fucking sleep all day. Of course I will.
Well, he has to go to work to tell them that he's taking the day off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
And
doesn't
Rem's work,
You
too.
can't just message them. Yes.
And he's worried. He's like hella worried. Also, is Sierra behind you growling?
Yes, she is. She's
That
very
makes
excited.
sense. Okay, that makes sense. I was like, what the fuck is that noise?
But then he goes to his workplace, and Riften-sama, as always, is a chat and is just like, oh, congrats, dude. Yeah, do what you need to do. And all of his granny co-workers are like, you know, Subaru, I always saw it in you. You were supposed to be a dad.
And Rem's coworkers are super ecstatic and over the moon. He thought they would be like super anti it
and it's funny
like
because,
weirded out. But
like, honestly, this is like it's mentioned that he's only been employed with Riften for like a couple of weeks or something like that. So the fact that Riften's being so like supportive is something that he wasn't expecting, you know. And
less than a month.
I was gonna mention that the fact that like Riften was like, why am I being so nice? I told you I have high hopes for you. I invested the asset hope in you. Of course, I'd try everything so that I can recover my shares, right? And that's one of the things where it's like, I invested the asset of hope into you, right? And that sort of like philosophy, I was thinking about how Karagi sees everything as investing in value, right? It's sort of a give and take sort of thing. But in its way, it's also kind of spiritual, more than just like the regular greed. It's more like a pragmatist sort of
Yeah.
society, in which you even think about like, yeah, it's nice to put stock in good things, and it's like what is good for the human spirit rather than just like what will make you the most money, right? I think that's like the way that their culture is, but I think it's kind of interesting that they think of even just like being nice as like a, I'm investing in being nice, right? Like
Well,
it's kind of funny.
if he keeps Subaru's position there, something that's positive for him, that he's like okay and is able to keep when something like this comes up, then it means that he doesn't have to go through the process of finding someone else that can withstand the harassment for the first week from all of his cougar milf other workers. Like
Yeah.
he has invested in Subaru, and Subaru got past that initial stage. Even in like the modern world, there's an issue with retainment
Yeah.
where it costs a lot of money to train somebody up and to get them like on the level and ready to start doing big projects. And if they do that and then they don't treat that person well and they leave, then they have to waste all that time and money to get someone brought back up to that position. But if you make it so they want to stay and that staying is the more convenient option, the option that's less work for them to do, that just going to be more beneficial for them, which in Subaru's case here is just having a good boss that treats him well and an
Yeah.
environment where people are supportive of him and want him to succeed. That's going to make it so that he can do well there. And he doesn't really see that future from it yet, because I don't really think he sees being a maid to Riften as his job he can do for the rest of his life and use that to support a family yet. Even though at this point he's being told, congratulations on having a family, I'm going to help you out with this, right to his face.
I think you're
Yeah.
right about the philosophy part too, because you even see it in Howbell and even the employment officer guy, because like they keep constantly saying that Subaru owes them, but they never come back for money. They always just come back for like the emotional stuff and like friendship more than anything.
Yeah, they've given their time and energy to him, and they want him to do that for them as well, which he does, because that's just
And
who
he does,
Subaru is. He
yeah,
thrives here.
which is a very good environment for him.
But on his way back, he runs into a increasingly familiar face.
Yeah. And you know, really, like she starts talking to him, and he's like, "What the heck is going on?" Like he's immediately caught off guard by it, but he has to, like, he's fighting back in the way that Subaru does when he's starting. He's like he's still being honest with his feelings. He's like, I don't like you." Like he's being honest, right? Like what was that for? And basically, she's like, "Well, you know, I'm capable of killing anyone I want to kill. When I thought to kill you yesterday, I had plenty of time to do so, and yet I didn't kill you, so I have no intention of killing you." Which feels a bit disjointed when you think about the story where it's like she was saying die, die, die in our point of views as the reader. So it was like her saying this, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Right? So at the moment I had this kind of thought, I was like, this feels more playful, like she has this sort of weird bitterness about it. She's like torturing
She's tsundere.
Subaru. Yeah, she's tsundere, right? I was
Yeah.
like, she tortures Subaru and she's repulsed by him vocally, and she makes a show to get his attention or reaction, right? So I was like, I was thinking along those lines. I was like, is she just a tsundere for some reason? Was she like a member of, you know, like, is there something about him being a witch cultist that she doesn't like or whatever? And I will get to that later, but I was kind of right. But
Yeah.
the idea behind that is something about it. But she's like, "Yep, you're taking me home," and he's like, "I wouldn't do that." And he's like, "No, it's not an option. You're taking me home. When I say that you're taking me home, I mean that, right?" So he kind of reluctantly is forced to guide her in there. And then what happens next? Because I skipped over this part, or I skipped over writing down my notes here. So what exactly happens next, if everyone remembers?
Yeah, so what happens next here is they eventually go back to their house. Subaru is still kind of concerned about
More
this
weirded
person who
out than
introduces
anything.
himself as Tia,
Yes,
but
it's Tia.
also
that was
can-
not on purpose.
can understand that she doesn't have that bloodlust that this person that attacked them did. So he's cautiously optimistic with this situation.
Right, and throughout the entire following exchange, every time she lashes out and starts like damaging the apartment, Hallibal's not reacting to it. No one's really getting hurt. Like they can tell it's all kind of for show more than
Yes.
anything else.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Another thing is that Rem offers her tea, right? And
Yes.
this is something I want to bring up because I thought it was cute. This is the first time I was like, okay, this character is kind of cute, right? And it's when she's offered the tea and she's like, ouch, this is hot. And then Rem's like, oh, I'm sorry, you're okay. And she's like, I'm impressed. I let my guard down. This happens. You're a tough one. And it's like,
So
she's like,
cute.
oh, you hurt me, you know?
it's also a really good showing of Rem's strength as a character, where she sees this person that's threatened her husband and now her unborn child, and she decides, okay, I'm gonna address this, and I'm gonna address this as best of a person as I can be. Let's sit down, let's talk about this. But she's very firm with Tia.
Mhm.
She doesn't lie, she doesn't beat around the bush and be polite where she doesn't need to be. She's polite and honest, but she's firm, and she tells her how it is. And we learn through all of this that Tia's missing her light ball. Yeah, just her light ball, whatever the fuck that means. All the characters are like, what does that mean?
And thinks
And
Ren
then-
has it.
And
Yes.
thinks Rem has it, which is a big misdirection because Subaru throughout this conversation is dreading and thinking, wait, does she hate me because I'm a witch? Like, I smell like the witch? Like, he's immediately starting to think in that direction, and then he gets thrown off and is like, wait, it's Rem? Huh?
Nani?
And
Yeah, he
she's
was the
sure
one
about
going-
it. Her nose never fails, which
Yeah.
is something that Halibel said earlier. And I thought this kind of parallelism was kind of funny between these
Mhm.
two characters, where it's like, my nose would never fail me, and they're both like, yeah, like Halibel's like, I guess my nose failed me earlier too. So he's kind of like, no, you could be mistaken. She's like, no, but I know that this is the person who stole my,
Yes.
like, I smell it, right? This is the same scent, right? And it's
So-
like I was confused. I was like, huh?
The
So
thought
what-
of your scent being like kind of the driving factor for determining is also just a running theme throughout this entire story, where it ends up being a huge focal point for why they were attacked at all in the streets and towards the end. So that idea of my nose failed me. This whole
Well-
conflict starts because someone's nose failed them.
Well, you know what happens? This is something that happens, I don't know, earlier or later, but Halibel's talking to Rem, and he's like, yeah, the reason why we got into this is because my nose led me to Subaru, like, understanding what Subaru was and having this interest. So all three of the characters have this sort of weird sniffing power. I guess it's what the Tepe is trying to say is that if you smell people, maybe you'll understand them better. So I think that's what he's trying to say. I media analysis is so easy, guys. I figured out the narrative of ReZero. Smelling people makes you understand them better.
God damn, he's figured it out. He's got the key to the city.
He knows
I,
what's up.
One thing that's interesting about this conversation is Rem solves this situation in a very diplomatic way and says, okay, if you think I'm the one who stole it and you're not willing to kill us and do violence, how about you stay and keep an eye on me to make sure that I'm the one who stole this thing? Subaru is extremely depressed because of this, because he now is like, oh man, wait, does that mean we can't be intimate? And then
Constantly.
we just get like a random conversation with Halibel during all of this, where Halibel is like, okay, I'm not sensing any danger here, because they have a conversation after when Rem and Tia are having their own conversation. Hal was like, come on, Subaru, let's go have a manly conversation, man on man. So they go to have a conversation, and Halibel, Subaru questions him more on being a shinobi, and like, yo, don't you have like people that follow you or like a group so that you could like deal with stuff like this? And Halibel's like, no, I'm actually one of the last, thank you very much. To which Subaru just goes along with. We later learn this is a complete fucking lie.
Yeah, he's lying. He actually does have shinobi that he works
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. But this
The
is a-
shinobi way to lie.
Shinobi
you know,
always
you're-
keeps his secrets.
Exactly. He talks about it later.
Yeah.
One thing that Halibel, he also talks about how, he, but yeah, he said, I've heard about some living in the middle of nowhere in hidden villages due to racial circumstances. But as for my wolf brethren, they couldn't run hides, so they're reaching extinction. He was also talking about the fact that his races, as we said before, going extinct. And Halibel's like, shouldn't we just kill her? and Subaru's like, no, I trust Rem, who persuaded her, so I think that Rem can keep her at bay through this like ploy. And Tia says, the thing is, Tia cannot kill anyone that is not hers to kill, as a Shinigami, right? Is what she says.
Yes.
And the idea that there's a life inside of Rem is sort of the thing that's kind of keeping her from killing Rem right now.
Yeah, Tia's just pro-life and can't kill Rem because of it.
Yeah, she's pro-life.
Damn.
Yeah, I guess Tia's just pro-life. That is what we're talking about here. But also, I kind of want to talk about this. There's something interesting about spirits now that we know that, this is Hestia, or not Hestia.
Tia? I'm here.
Wrong Tia. Zarestia. And the idea that, like, I think in Kararagi, all of the spirits might manifest more like, yokai, or like kami, or like, all these, like,
they're more wary of them there.
Yeah,
for sure.
They might have like a lot more cultural significance to like Japanese culture than, because they talk about the fact that she calls herself Shinigami, right? And her like blades are like a kamaitachi, which is a Japanese wind spirit that's like cuts things up all around. So like the idea is that there's a lot of connection between spirits that are kind of like, Japanese inspired in Kararagi, I think. So that's something to keep a lookout on, I think. But yeah.
So we get a resolution to this where Halabal, Rem, and Subaru are like, so you just fucking destroyed our place of living. We're going to take what isn't destroyed, and you're going to compensate us for this damage, and then say, you're going to stay here, and this is the place you're going to live. You're going to clean up your fucking mess. And then they just leave. And then Rem and Subaru discuss that maybe they should have an extra room between them and Tia, so she doesn't hear anything at night. But Tia insists
on taking the adjacent room.
They take the adjacent room, and the next day, Tia is a steaming mess. Now, hearing the noises that come through their room at night, that poor spirit.
Jesus.
And then we go to our next major time skip here, right? To go from 3 months to 6.
Are they that shameless that they're that loud?
Yes.
Jesus.
Now,
Rem needs to quiet down. She must be acting. She's putting too much into it.
Honestly, girl, calm down.
One thing to note before we get this time skip is 2 important things start to happen before this time skip. Rem, Subaru, Halabal, and Tia start eating all their meals together in the mornings. In a kind of family setting, and Tia is forcing Halabal to find her work to compensate Rem and Subaru.
Oh right, yes.
I'm not gonna lie, I started shipping the 2 of them at this point.
Yeah.
I won't lie,
good.
so did I.
Good.
This is also where I think a kind of theme for at least Rem's side of the story, but Subaru as well, for kind of his eventual arc through this, whereas Zarestia this entire time acts immature. Like Tia here is acting like a bratty child that has a ton of power to her.
Yeah.
And the way that Rem handles her is like a mom disciplining a
They even say
toddler, basically. Yeah.
The idea is that she's like, practicing, right?
Yeah, it's a trial run. They know that they're going to have.
Her tactics are what I use when I'm teaching too, so it's pretty accurate.
Where it's like everything from like you're making a mess, you have to clean all this up. We're going to have our meals together. We should have a room between us and the kid so that they don't hear us, and then they insist on staying close to the parents regardless. It's all there. And then she has to deal with that mistake, including the really cool Uncle Halibal who lives next door.
Yeah.
Who I'm sure can either smell or sniff it if that is so loud that they are being heard through.
We get, this is too horny.
How much is this man? This is why he likes having them around. Fuck. Free real estate for him.
I was literally like, this is something like, as I said before, I was like, there's something weird about. Yeah, exactly. There's something weird about the way in which this is conceived. I was like, okay, but we get to it being more wholesome later,
Yes. So moving on, we get a couple next few days of what happens next, where Tia starts to become more comfortable and kind of integrate herself into this found family kind of feeling. Tia and Hal actually go on a adventure to save the entire city.
Yeah.
Like, it's a completely offhanded thing. But they go to get a bounty, and it ends up discovering a large plot which would have led to the entire city literally blowing up into ash.
I was thinking about this. I was like, this is the fact that Halibel and Tia get main quest tier events due to their high level, right?
Yeah.
They're both like level like max, and the fact that means that the quests that they get offer are higher level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you guys thought this might be something that happens in Kararagi in the future, the main story. That Tappei just said these two went off and resolved it themselves.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where I'm like, I think that the truth is that the world is more volatile when Subaru is going down his actual path, but I think it is necessary volatility. You know what I mean? So when stuff like this happens, I mean, maybe it would happen anyways, right? But I think that, like, if it does happen, it would happen in a greater and dramatic fashion with more people, with more, you know, backing, with more whatever, if Subaru was around.
Being slothful just made them NPCs, is really what it is.
No,
that's what I mean, yeah.
They are the boarding house for the two main characters.
Yeah, in a, like an RPG, right? It's like these are Subaru and Rem in this story are citizens, right? I mean, sure, they're citizens that have important lore behind them, right? Like Rem is the last Oni.
You find that out later in the quest line, you know?
Well,
Yeah,
Subaru is just playing the Homemaker DLC that's in every main single-player RPG now, where it's like, this is where you get to go and build your base in Fallout, or this is where you can make your own house in Skyrim. And
yeah, he used all the Skyrim mods so he could impregnate Rem.
Exactly, yes.
He
100%.
did. He stole the Oni. No, I'm not gonna say.
At least he didn't use all the the naked mods, you know. That's just too wild.
You know,
Until
that's
the
lost,
bathhouse scene, I guess.
Yeah, there is the
That's
bathhouse
lost
scene,
it.
so you're
the battle
wrong.
scene's great.
One thing to note on the volatility of the situation, they catch this plot early, and the only reason it starts to go wrong is because they caught it. Like, this guy has set up like a trap that if someone was to investigate him, it would have happened. So I feel like this happening at this point in the story is directly because Subaru made Tia and Hal come together.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it that thing of like, you don't know when this event could have happened in the main story, right? We next get a classic bathhouse moment in every anime and light novel fucking to ever exist. So they go to the bathhouse because, you know, poor Tia after this grimy day of work is gross, and Hal's like, man, I need to wash, please help. So they go, and Tia starts to climb the wall of the bathhouse to where Subaru and Hal is on their side, of the male side, across from the female side. And it's like, hey guys, the view up here is really cool. And Rem then uses her soul chain and drags her down into the water. And we get a really cool reference to Arc 2 where Subaru's like, that thing's dangerous, right? And Rem's like, it's for protection, but it's for protection.
For protection, I'm protecting myself. Don't worry about it. He's like, that's nostalgic, innit? The fucking Vietnam flashbacks I'm sure he felt.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the things is, well, I want to touch on this real quick. It comes out later. Basically, Subaru is giving, like, I have a cool idea for the bath to, like, some people there. Like, our Halibel, he's like, here's, like, an invention we can make to make sure that fur doesn't come out in the bath. And that, you know, you can catch all of it in a net or whatever. I thought that was kind of funny because we start seeing later on in the story that he is coming up with ideas. Like, you know, Subaru has this fanciful notion when he first comes into the ReZero world that he uses all of his modern knowledge as leverage to, you know, be successful, right? He's like, what if I invent this or invent that? This is a part of it in, you know, his civilian life that he's like, what if I start making little things to solve this and that problem, right?
Mayonnaise.
Mayonnaise, right? And yeah, when that happens, right, Tia gets knocked off of the ledge by Rem.
Knocked off. She gets pulled off by the Morning Star. Where was she? Where does she keep this thing?
It's
Upper half.
like it's a weapon she can call forth through her soul.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I actually can't talk about that because that's spoilers. Fuck! I was gonna compare it to something else, but I can't.
So I think it's honestly a joke, though, of just
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
there's not a real answer for
There's
it.
a
She
gag
just
here.
can pull
No,
it out of nowhere.
No, I'm almost certain it is like an actually like soulbound weapon. Like it's a joke. It's a joke scenario that happens, but the whole point is that
Like I know what you're trying to compare it to, and I could not disagree that that's what it is more. I
Yes.
think it is just a joke that she pulls this out from under her skirt, and so where did she get it in the bathhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she eats her down, and then Rem gives her a lap pillow, and
They fight over that.
They do, and it one of the moment where I'm like, yeah, I was like, this was the peak level. I'm like, is this story just all gonna be horny stuff? And I wasn't opposed to it. I was just like, wow, he's really going for it.
Tappei went on his fanfic arc about his own
Yeah,
fucking
his
show.
Fine, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, I'll do it myself.
All your fans shit, it was disgusting. I need my own. Let's
But,
pick the one I wanted to get rid of in the first place.
During this time, we get a couple months time skip, and everyone's getting really happy. You know, it's like I think about 3 months passes at this point.
Yeah, it
And
jumps from
it's become
Yeah.
it is now a family unit. Everyone plays a role in a family familial way. It's really tight knit, and everyone is. It's described as the best time of their lives, basically at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We then see that Tia, for all of her work around the town, because she's the fucking main character, has been gifted by the entire town with so many bits of food and like jewelry and all this other lovely stuff. So they decide it's time to celebrate tonight. And Rem's like, you know, I can't eat all of this myself, Tia. Let's help me out. It's like, sure. And they have a party. Halabal, as always, is drinking in this social setting, and he slips some to Tia.
Something.
Yeah.
Tia seems to be unconscious at this point, but then we get a big tonal shift.
Yes.
Tia starts lashing out and attacking Rem.
Yeah, she was crying in her sleep, and you know, she was muttering something, and then she lashed out and started attacking Rem. She
Rem took
comes
the bottle
to.
away.
Yeah, Rem takes the bottle away. She comes to and realizes what she's done, and then she just leaves.
Well,
know?
everybody else gets her to the hospital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they confirm the baby and Rem are okay.
right.
Yep.
What? Yeah, did she? No, she doesn't do this yet, or she? No.
She got like
Well-
smacked into the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the thing here is that like before this, they were talking about how Tia is like a little sister, and that like at this point, you know, they're starting to understand that something's weird about her. Right?
Mhm.
Halbel's investing in Light Ball, he hasn't found anything about it, which is like Halbel's the homie. He's like doing all this work for them
Yeah.
for their sake, just because he's nice. And what I kind of felt like is that Tia is like a natural force. Like everyone around her is aware that they're just putting her off. Like they're convinced that she's going to kill them or once, you know, Rem's baby is born, because that's just how odd she is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she meant when she said that she would, despite how much she's learning, despite how much that they care about her and that she cares about them, she's like, this, you know, is going to probably happen. And the Rem is like, are we just going to keep on having to have babies forever? You know? And I was just like, jeez.
Yeah.
Girls just loves being progongonant.
I know, right?
This is a point where we get another time skip, and it's revealed that ever since that night, because we're getting close to Rem's due date of around, I think it's around 10 months at this point, is the chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next chapter's at 10 months.
Yeah. We then learn Tia did not come back after that night, and it has deeply affected Subaru, Rem, and Halabel as well, very deeply. So Subaru has become a really good house husband because Rem has taught him the entire thing, and it's almost like a new invigoration in his life. Like he's become a good cook. He's very confident in himself in these areas. It's really sweet. But Rem and Subaru like talk about how much they miss Tia, And Subaru then thinks about, like, this is a subject that whenever we think about it, we get really, really sad. And that Halibel has stopped coming over to eat meals with them ever since that night too, because he feels guilty about what happened and how he didn't stop it and how he accidentally caused it by giving her alcohol, despite him not knowing what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Halibel hasn't come back much either. He still looks out for them, but he's not feeling that close relationship they once had, and it left a hole in both Rem and Subaru's heart.
Yeah.
So Subaru, to cheer Rem up after ruminating about that again, and because he doesn't want the stress to hurt her or the baby, he goes to buy some groceries to make some food.
Just
but
real quick, I want to highlight just the homie Riften again, who basically just gifted them a house after their last place got ruined here.
Fucking love that, man.
Yeah,
that they
true.
think is too big for even the three of them is going to be. Which is meant to be sad, but it's also just ridiculous that his boss just gave him a house.
Here's a house. You're my investment.
He rolled really high on the boss, I must say.
Before Subaru goes to the grocery store, he stops off at the unemployment place to check in for Tia.
Yes, he does. That's a thing I actually forgot to mention.
Yeah, because they've got a notice out for her looking for it. Because, like, Rem even says, like, I love her. I want to forgive her as soon as we can find her.
Yeah.
I'm worried about her, even though
Because it was
Subaru
obvious that she
claims
didn't
to
do it on
be
purpose.
upset with her. I don't know how.
No, he's
genuine
not,
that is.
really.
Subaru is
always like
lying
that.
for his fucking teeth.
Subaru's always like that. He's like, I'm so upset about this person.
I'm
And
gonna
then, like, as
drag
soon as
her
they
out
start
of the
talking to
library,
them-
kicking
I
and
think-
screaming if I
Yeah,
have
exactly.
to.
Yeah. Subaru is very much a person that I think his kindness also rubs off on other people, where I think he influences Rem and even Halibel, I think, through their relationship in that level of, obviously not being kind to the point of like, oh yeah, I'm just going to straight up die in this situation, but cautious kindness, right? Like, whenever you can, be good to people. But Subaru is going beyond what he's influencing all these people around him, and he's going to that level of like, I can't in principle not be kind, even if it's the danger to me. So we get this moment where he's grocery shopping and he sees out the corner of his eye a flash of white, and he's immediately like, Tia, I found you! Oh my god! This is Tia, but she's wearing dark clothing yet again, and all she says is die, 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 like a machine gun. So Subaru starts to get attacked by this Tia, and then he gets scooped up and saved by dun 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 the other Tia, White Tia.
So yeah,
Yeah,
let's talk
really
about this real
unfortunate
quick.
phrasing in Tepe's
Yeah,
writing.
white and black tea. Well, what can you do about it?
What
Yeah,
can you do
um,
about it?
Yeah.
He's not wrong. She's in a black dress and then
Yeah,
not in a
yeah.
black dress.
But what's interesting about this, and I immediately thought about it, and let me know what you guys think about this, right? White, black Tia, right? There are multiple Tias. This is the theme that I'm picking up on. Hal Bell, multiple versions of him, right? And this is like an interesting thing. But I was wondering if you guys felt like this. Is this a reference to there being like Emilia Satella, right? Like the way in which these people manifest. Like we get later
Oh.
why it's like this, but like we've seen, Emilia transform into, Satella or whatever beforehand. And we've seen something like similar to this. I wonder if it's part of something like this. Like we kind of get the idea that because she has the power of her like crystal, she can transform into somebody that looks like Tia, right? But like, what is your feelings about how that what that implies about like the way that your power can manifest into somebody else?
I know that like the power of manifesting in someone else is something that we've kind of seen before in some other stuff. I don't want to mention it, but we talked about it being used super well in our last Arc 7 episode as the ability of one of the people that we've come to really like. Just that one's done intentionally rather than unintentionally. So it doesn't feel too out of place in the looking like one version of Tia versus the other one. As I said before, I had just assumed that they were twins at this point.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
the shock
thought
in
that
this
was,
chapter was what was the surprise to me, not that there was two of them.
Right. Yeah, like what it was. I was I kind of knew a lot of the basics of this, but seeing it put together in plot made me like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Because it made less sense than I thought, because I didn't know that the second Tia was who she was. And I also was like, how is it that she looks like Tia through this? Just by using Zarestia's power and whatnot and being lended it. Like, what is, like you manifest as somebody else, like you manifest appearance-wise as somebody else? It's interesting.
So I think we'll talk about this more later when we learn about how Zarestia works.
How it happens, yeah.
Yeah, but I am excited to talk about it because it's more spirit lore that I was not expecting to get in this at all that we got. So, we're having an intense battle, and then we get a huge tonal shift where Subaru starts throwing green onions at evil Tia to distract her. So, ally Tia can come help out and beat her up. Apparently the onion attacks are super effective because this Tia starts to freeze up, and then Subaru, I think is this a bottle of alcohol he like smashes on her?
Yeah.
Yeah, some sake.
Sake.
Yeah.
Cooking sake.
And it makes her freeze and like freak out and scream, to which Tia then boosh, and they manage to escape without completely defeating evil Tia. But
does Halbel tell them about who this is or like what's going on?
I think it's right.
He tells Rem
after this. Yeah.
During this.
Oh, during this. That's right. That's why.
And then they find out right
also
after.
The one kick is like it knocks the disguise off of her. Like that's what causes her to start changing back.
Yeah.
After this, or maybe it was the alcohol mixed with the kick. It's one of those situations like what actually killed Elsa in it, where it's like their combination and everything worked out, and we get to see that beneath this disguise of Tia wearing black is actually a young Oni woman with 2 horns who continues to shout out "Die, die, die" at them.
Which is why I was still under the belief it was Capella at this point. Because I was kind of confused at that. I didn't realize it was a disguise. I thought she was like transforming, so I thought it was Capella at that point.
To note, I don't believe the Oni things are revealed at this point.
I have the page pulled up.
Yeah, it was.
It is revealed?
Yeah, because Subaru's the one that's like, something I should tell you guys after he was filled in was that she had Oni horns. And Rem went, an Oni? What?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
In the fight, she gets kicked after the sake and rolls on the ground. The disguise breaks and melts off of her as if she was transforming. And then he sees 2 things poking out of her head. 2 horns, you're an Oni. And then she continues to yell die.
Yeah. And we then switch perspectives to Halabel and Rem, where we learn that Halabel has been doing some investigating in the background and learns that that thing that was foreshadowed earlier about the quest for Zarestia's bed, everyone that went on that basically died or flunked it out, apart from one person that survived and managed to claim some of Zarestia's power. Someone who hates the Witch's Cult, like fucking despises the Witch's Cult. Yep. So we then realize, Subaru is in incredible danger because of his scent. So yeah, we get this moment where Tia saves him and they run off. And
get back to Rem and Halibel, who
they get back to Rem and Halibel.
Been discussing this,
and they start discussing all of this. So you can infer from this, because specifically with how Rem's smell towards the witch cult works, that the person that is doing this has been affected by the witch cult in some way, similar to Rem.
Yeah.
And is targeting Subaru because of that.
Because of that, yeah.
For the same reason that Rem did as well.
Yes.
But before they can really hash this all out and figure out what's going on, wouldn't you know it, you gotta have seen it coming and expected it. Rem's getting ready to have the baby.
Yeah.
Well, there's also something that comes like just before it too, because it's kind of coincidental. She was like technically not going into labor yet, and So this is the point of the video recording where I accidentally hit my XLR cable and completely just removed any audio from the podcast. It sounded like a snowstorm. So I had to delete about 10 minutes worth of discussion. Basically, we just, I think we end up talking about our theories about the witch cult. So there's only a little bit. There was mostly just summary about Rem's birth and what's going on, and a bit of Tia's background. So if you have questions, launch them below and we'll try to answer them as we can. I'm so sorry. I now have a note on my computer to not flail my arms while I'm recording. Okay, enjoy the rest of the video. Whee!
I mean to say is if it's a coordinated effort from these multiple different, like, seemingly separate factions of the witches cult, could we not then theorize that, like, their gospel directed them to do this to all these Oni villages? So, like, you know, what is making the gospel tell them to do these things? Like, what is the interest here?
My idea, my that's a good point. Why do this? Well, I know who is doing this, but I mean, like,
yes,
obviously, like, it's a defective gospel that is being controlled by somebody else, right? To direct them to do whatever. The
and
idea,
I guess the true one does say that there's only supposed to be like the one survivor that then goes on to help Roswell.
Exactly, and that's something that Roswell. Maybe that's why Roswell knew to kind of spare Rem and Ram, because he had the true future. That he was like, no, these are the ones that I need to save, right? So it was kind of like preordained like that. I could see that being the case. And another thing that, like, is interesting is that, I think what is significant about the Oni, are they the only people capable of doing something to defeat something? Or, like, what is it that Oni have that is necessary to eradicate them? Of course, they're, like, the strongest race, as people think, right? Like, they fundamentally have the most talent for violence, right?
Well, yeah, because when their like horn is out properly, they could go indefinitely. It will end up killing them at the end, but they could overcome basically, like, I think it's meant to imply that they can push through like a relentless assault for it. So entire villages of them are clearly going to be main threats to the witches cult. But it might even be something older, like an ancient hatred between the two.
There might have been some ancient stuff by the time of the witches, or even before that, about the Oni clan, that there's like an ancient history, because we know that the Oni clan have this ancient sort of, spiritual practice. They have a lot of like cultural ties that are, significant to their village.
They have their own religion.
This god of the god of Oni, right?
The Oni god, yeah.
Oni god,
yeah. So, like, the idea that, like, perhaps a lot of like, obviously not all villages are attacked. We see later on in the story that, like, there's a lot of villages that are extinct. We see in this story that even wolf people are, hunted and killed. And it makes me wonder, like, who is trying to do this, or if it is just regular, like, these people are strong, we need to take them out, these guys are threats. I can't really think of it off the top of my head, the reason why they would, attack the Oni particularly, but I think there's a shoe to be dropped later on in the story about what the Oni can do.
I think they're both connected in that sense of the ideas of, the people in this world are pushing out these minority groups to, like, because they're strong, right? But also, I think that's connected to the witches cult. If that's the means to their end, are they influencing society in certain ways to make sure certain groups are pushed to the side?
Possibly.
Because we know the witches cult has been around for a while, and they could be in the shadows influencing culture and opinions and stuff like that. If that's one of their end game things, that could be a thing they're doing.
I think there's an adversarial relationship with some of the old cultural ways of some of these races that they need to eradicate, because they hold ancient information that might subvert them, is my guess. There is also the idea that I'm not going to talk about Arc 7 stuff, but I kind of want to. But yeah, basically, I think that there is potential, I'm going to keep this vague, there's potential that due to some of these races' beliefs, they are entirely counter to what the witch cultists, authorities are. You know what I mean? Their authorities are something that they want to snuff out from the world because of the races stuff. And obviously we see that sort of with the elves. We see that, we'll get to that later. But yeah.
But going beyond from there, we can jump kind of back to the main story at this point, right?
Yes. Which is very easy and quick to go through, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we get to this point where we've got this moment where Rem is starting to go into labor, and Tia's off to go fight this other Tia. We get this interlude chapter, and then we get this moment between Rem and Subaru as she's in labor, and Subaru's taking her to the medical facility to get ready to give birth. And they talk about their insecurities about not being good enough for their families, and how they both felt like they've let their families down, and that they're failures, and that they don't love themselves. And it's a point of character development for them where they both come to acknowledge it and decide to help support each other grow beyond that.
Yeah.
Cue what we saw in season 2 for both of them.
Yeah. Did we talk about the fact that like the history behind this this Oni in terms of like how she came to get her power? You talk about that
that wasn't in the. Was that in this interlude? I suppose.
It was. Yes.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that she went on the quest.
Yeah.
Oh, because I wrote my notes are like attacked by Capella, and then it starts talking about how she went to the cave,
she went to
her perspective. Yeah.
Well, then we get Tia's perspective too at some point. Are you talking about that one?
Yeah, I thought that was before we were talking about.
I think it's Rem gets ready to give birth. Subaru gets kicked out of the room. He has to go ruminate. They go off. Yeah. So they get the backstory of Tia, and then they go fight. Not Tia.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, cool. So, all right. We get this moment, and then Subaru's kicked out by the doctor because he's like, "Yo, I'm not even supposed to be here. I'm just a figurehead. Men do not belong here."
I love how this is simultaneously realistic, but it felt like almost comedic the way that he was like, "All right, time to go.
Get the fuck out of here.
Get out.
You're not needed.
Go finish your character plot line while she finishes hers."
Yeah. So then Subaru and Hal have another manly heart-to-heart moment outside the labor room where Subaru's just worried and anxious, and Hannibal feels bad and is like, this is the place of men. We don't belong here. We can't fight this intense battle of childbirth.
This is Rem's battle. Let's go.
And then, so this isn't a thing we mentioned earlier, but Halibel, out of what we thought, the reader at the moment would think is like a thing of kindness, gave Tia a bracelet that he also wears, and Subaru's like, "Oh, friendship bracelets." Well, Halibel knows that Tia has just lost her fight with other Tia because that bracelet breaks as he's speaking to Subaru.
Mm-hmm.
I already knew that she didn't die. I was just like, yeah. They were like, "Oh, she must be dead," and I'm like, "Okay, sure."
And Halibel, in a really like fucking shonen moment, just straight up is like, "I want to finish her fight," like. I can't let this be like keep going. Not only just because we have to protect you, because that evil Tia is still out of there, but I want to continue what she desired. And he's just like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I lied about not being a leader of Shinobi. I'm a fucking liar. I do have a group that can help us right now." And Subaru's like, "Okay, I need to resolve this too. So I'm gonna come help." So they go to subjugate evil Tia together, in which Subaru starts using his taboo to draw evil Tia towards him because they know that she's drawn to the witch's scent.
Which I found wild as well, because I was pretty sure the last time he used it, everyone around him died. But I guess that was Satella choosing it.
It's about intent. So think of it in that sense of, it's like the moment with the whale. When Subaru is doing that, he's not trying to release that to someone else. He's talking to Satella by doing that, if that makes sense. Like he's saying, "Satella, I'm going to invoke the taboo towards you," not saying it to someone else with that intent, if that makes sense.
What I wrote down here is, I wonder what Satella is thinking about this. And I was like, she must be super jealous about this entire situation, obviously. But then I was like, I wonder about his mechanics now. I was like, well, stuff that we know about Arc 7, I'm like, well, now it feels doubtful. But I was like, one of the things that I was like, yeah, that's why I think this is kind of like, for the sake of the what if of it, rather than it being like a accurate 100% representation of what would happen. But what I mean is that, um, like, can she not influence him unless he dies? Is what I was thinking about. Because he hasn't died in so long, maybe she can't even like communicate with him. Maybe she can't even do anything.
Well, the way that she's interacted with him before have been through Amelia.
Mm-hmm.
It's either been possessing her or killing her or getting into the witch's dream. Otherwise, she hasn't been able to do anything unless he invokes a taboo or dies. And he's
That's
gone
true.
A year and a half without dying at this point.
That's what I mean. I'm like, I wonder if she's just like she can't do anything unless
What
Yeah.
what
he
could she
dies.
do? If Amelia is out or like the witch's cult won, I mean, Satella's influence is kind of moot at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
But
fair.
yeah, we have this moment of this fight, where we see just Hannibal being a complete badass. By the way, like this guy is so cool.
We
Like,
do get Zarestia's story before the fight
Yeah.
starts.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanted
we
to
get
cover that.
We
we
learn a
get-
lot about.
before the fight starts.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Like they're talking about like, hey, like we're gonna go and kill her. Do you know the Song of the Wind, this lullaby, the story of Zarestia? And then it moves to her perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Lullaby the Wind. I thought about this.
Never mind. I'm sorry. I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I
I was
was
about to say,
misreading it does go from her perspective, but it's
I'm
evil Tia's perspective.
I'm glad we're all wrong in terms of how this is ordered. But
Yes.
I think we should
the-
speed through the summaries too, especially since we
Yeah.
have so much more to go through, and
Sure, for
people
sure.
have probably read it at this point.
Right. Let's talk about. So basically, it's interesting how so she kind of went there, and all of her people died, as Halbel said. But Zarestia's backstory is interesting, and we just know that she's motivated by hatred and she wants to kill witch cultists. That's all this Oni wants. Zarestia, for her part, was there before, as we said before, dragons, and before even like elves and stuff like that. Like there was no other races besides her. And then they started to ask her to do stuff, and eventually she was just like this primal being of like energy who just did the things, hunted for food and stuff like that. And then eventually they started asking her stuff, and their ask became more complicated, and she was like, sure, fine, I'll use wind to do this, I'll use wind to do that. But then one time somebody asked her to do something with fire, and she was like, well, I like wind the most, but if you really want me to do fire, I guess I'll do fire. And she did fire and wind, and then it burned down a whole bunch of stuff, because fire and wind equals bushfires, and we see that Kararagi is a desolate place. I wonder if it's because of that huge fire that happened once upon a time, that kind of made it a desert. That's my implication of it.
That's why Zarestia's bed is the way that it is.
Yeah, and then
She made her bed. She lays in it.
Yep, she's there, and then they kind of trick her. They give her a bunch of alcohol, and
Chop
Subaru was
up her
talking about this.
limbs.
Yeah, Subaru was talking about this earlier. The fact that in his folklore, a lot of ways that yokai were defeated were by giving them alcohol as a trick and then killing them while they're inebriated, like tricking a god with like a gift and then killing them. That's what happened with her, and then she, got chopped up into bits and pieces, and with her, decapitated head, she started howling, and the howling became a wind that cut everybody in a million pieces around her bed where she lay.
Right, because the other body parts it took from her took the other elements away from her, so she was left with only wind.
Yeah, and that's crazy that maybe she was once the great spirit, that she had all the powers, and then people started taking the powers away from her, like bit by bit.
Well, she had fire. They asked for it, and she said sure, but also have wind, and now she only has wind.
Yeah, exactly. So
which is why I want my body back.
Yeah,
from earlier.
Do you think maybe there's almost like a Prometheus moment of like the birth of other greater spirits, or like the birth of elements spreading?
I think there's not enough to even speculate on that.
Yeah, because it's so vague.
It is vague. Yeah.
If she loses her abilities due to the limbs coming off, I feel like it's totally valid. Could be given to the right person, spread around. Someone gets power, makes it even more, split off more limbs.
We presume that spirits were around before everybody in general, and she wasn't unique in this, but maybe she was. I don't know. She was like a fox before, or was she like, I forgot. She was like an animal, right? And the idea is that, like, the yeah, I wonder. Yeah, we'll get to it later. But I was thinking about the fact that this sort of way that Tepe writes a lot of their backstories, like both of the characters' backstory, the Oni and Zarestia, he has a knack for writing things in a very like simple and primitive way. He does it for the Synarch Bishop's backstories where they're like, and then I just wanted to be free, and I liked Wind because it was freedom, and then they took it from me, they took everything, and it was just like just one little spark sets everything down to motion into evil, right? Like she became murderous and want to kill everybody since that day, and she can't help it. Like that's
Villanera.
all that she wants, you know. So that one thing of desiring freedom and it being taken away from her, people will be taking advantage of her, you know, willing to do anything because she's free, came into this murderous attempt that she's held for the rest of her life.
Well, I mean, a series of events of like thousands of years of doing menial things for people over time with very little respect or kindness brought back to you. I mean, it just takes that one moment to snap you.
Well, because
That
people took advantage
iceberg.
of her kindness. Yeah.
Yeah, over centuries. Like that anger makes sense to boil over and then become a Shinigami. I would. I'd feel that.
Especially if you're just ahead at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
But
Because it was like a free thing. That's the reason why she's so primitive and she doesn't understand people. And we get that impression with the reason why she was acting, because this is the first time she actually intimated with any humans or like understood them properly. Was
Yeah.
talking to Subaru and Rem and stuff. Halbo.
This all happens due to them actually defeating the Oni that's inside of this shell that she's taken to use Zaresty's powers. This Oni is like her name is Rize?
Rize.
Like Rize, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Risa. Right.
She
I'd
actually
say Rize.
she has hatred towards Rem. She considers her one a traitor for being near someone with a witch's scent, but also two, she's envious of Rem because Rem is living the life she wanted with him.
Envious, huh? Wow.
Yeah. So it seems that she had a very similar situation to Rem and lost him in the attack.
I
and
just
she
thought about
died.
this. Is this Rem's Satella to Amelia's Satella?
Yeah,
Ooh.
absolutely.
Yes.
Like, and upon the removal of Satella as an obstacle in his path, Subaru is going to be able to settle down with Amelia in a similar way that he can now with Rem.
Yeah, I
But-
think that's the implication that this is parallel path. Which we'll get to
Damn.
in a second.
Didn't think of it like
I don't want
that.
to go over the fight in its entirety because
Yeah,
it
we don't
is
have to go.
just
Yeah.
a fight
It's just
itself.
choreographed.
Only highlighting that I love Hallibur's victory here of I hit you once back in chapter 2 and that led to your downfall here.
Yeah.
Because I cursed you this entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one kunai.
That's almost like a very. I know it's a. I know you don't know much about Jujutsu Kaisen, Connor, but it's almost like a very Jujutsu Kaisen fight for me. Of like, yes, you see, I used this curse earlier, like 5 arcs ago, and now it's coming to fruition. Boom.
Domain expansion.
Domain
Side
expansion.
swipe 3 weeks ago.
All
Or I guess like
because
10 months ago.
he figured out that to deliver curses, which require contact with the curse user, he can make his weapons out of his own hair, fur, and spit in it blood,
Right.
and it counts apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was
This is
like,
OP.
don't ask me about how I made that bracelet. And I was like, hold on, sir, what? How's that
I
made?
hate alcohol so much, by
Yeah.
the way.
Bow, bow,
Yeah.
bow.
But then he just
moment-
stabs her and kills her. That's just
Yeah.
the end of it.
And
It's the end of it.
Subaru's like, I'm gonna remember your name forever. I'm sorry you had to die, but this is a necessary thing I need for my life.
And she
Mhm.
isn't. He isn't even he doesn't even. He's not even sure if her name is Rize because she only says like, right, and he's like Rize, yeah, and that's your name, right? And it's funny that he can't get that confirmed, but that's what he assumes, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll remember your name forever. And it's like, is that her name? It could not be her name,
She's trying to say the Rizzler, just didn't come out.
We then have a moment where Tia Zarestia is fully restored because there's no one influencing her power anymore, and she's just like
Might
she's
fall back.
basically like a godly power.
Yeah.
We then see a reveal that Riften and Klain, they all helped along the way too in some way, which is really cute.
Mhm.
But she's like, she starts to go towards Subaru, her bloodlust awakens, and she's like, I want to kill you,
Yeah.
but I don't. And then
Well,
we get a moment with her and Rem as well.
Yeah, she just pops
after
into the delivery
yeah.
room. Just
the
casual.
delivery room.
Yeah.
And she's like, while Rem is close to giving birth, but still can't, and she says, I want to kill you, but I can't because I love you all. and she kind of like almost releases her promise on Rem, which allows her to give birth.
Yeah. Another thing is, this is a funny thing that I think might not be intentional, might be, but Tia is like, yeah, I know, and then Rem's like, Tia-sama, I love Subaru-kun, and I was like, Rem has her own I love blank moment to Tia, and
As
it
it
is
should
like,
be.
yeah, Tia-sama, I love you too, but I can't live with you, and
Yeah.
it's like, that's so funny.
But
The I love you
yeah,
made me cry though.
It,
So
it was
then-
sweet, yeah.
We cut to the moment of Rem and Subaru's child being born, Rigel, their son.
Alright,
Yeah.
And we then
But it was like such a fucking time skip.
so we have
Yeah.
a huge time skip when we move to the next
like
part
4
of the
years old
story.
or 6-year-old.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Rigel
One
is
thing I
now-
want to talk about Regal's name.
A star.
Yes, it's a star.
But Ragel is generally the seventh brightest star in the night sky, and the brightest star outshined by Betelgeuse. So it's
Ah.
the most fitting name possible, I think.
Mm,
Yeah.
But yeah.
He mentions that he like all of his online usernames were always star names, that his is a star name that it always made him feel special, and that Rem was super on board with naming their kids after stars because she thought it was super poetic, even though she can't see the stars he's talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they planned for Rigel if it's a boy and Spica for a girl.
I like
Yeah.
the way they did it though, because they Subaru said like he wanted to name a girl Spica, and then they move over, and then all of a sudden the first thing you hear when you skip is just his name, and
But-
that's the
but-
time skip. I like
can
that. I
I-
thought that was cool.
Yeah. Can I just commiserate with Connor real quick? And I'm just gonna say this: when I heard the second child's name, my Kill Bill sirens clicked in my head.
Right?
I was like,
Yes.
I was
so
like,
I got the
"What?"
opposite for that, and I freaked. I could not tell you how loud I screamed in my house. But
Yeah, okay.
yes,
we'll get to
What?
that eventually. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Like the
Curious.
movie Kill Bill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, that was something because I know something that you guys don't.
I know something you don't know. It's literally the story of my fucking time
Okay.
here on this podcast.
We'll get it in a second. You'll catch up soon.
We're
Don't
gonna
worry.
be very quick with these next moments because we're running late, and also because these are very slice of lifey, like just
3
quick cut
a.m..
moments.
yeah.
Yeah.
What I was
Yeah,
gonna say
They
is
live
that
happily ever after. The end. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
that's what I mean. The end of the story feels like chronologically like what? Like I was reading the last part, I was like, something is going to happen, and then nothing happens, and I was like,
The big thing that happens is after a few years, Regal is a little shit who's a syscon, literally
Yep.
obsessed with sister from day one, loves to fight
Yep, yep.
Subaru, loves Rem.
and then there's weird
Um,
stuff with Restia being like,
yeah.
I
Well,
like
yeah,
you,
that's
I-
the thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Tia
that's why
comes
he's a-
back and like tries
That's why
to.
he's a syscon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's
But-
Restia's his little sister, or his sister technically.
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
that's the idea.
that's the idea, and that's why I was like,
and
oh,
she
I get
leaves
it.
him with a little bracelet so that she could call her whenever is needed. It seems like Subaru breaks it at one point to call her in to hang out with them. She comes and visits from time to time, like an older sister going off to college.
Yeah,
and
nothing
they
bad
spend
happens.
time.
There's no like real conflict here. It's just
No,
like
Just
then
happy.
they live happily ever after.
Subaru
and,
comes up with traditions.
And Rem learns to love herself with the help of her son and her husband.
Yes.
Yes.
which is this is oddly like when I hear about if stories, right? I'm like, well, these are just dark twists on the story, and it's supposed to be cautionary tales. This feels like, and then everything's all right actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
Like,
it was
everything's not only
Subaru
alright, things
overcame
are
his
great.
flaws just a little bit slower than in the main story, and it ended
Yeah.
up working out just fine in the end.
and the
Yeah.
very last thing we hear is that they have a Mitia that takes photographs, and the whole Natsuki family is together with Uncle Hybel and Tia in the picture.
One last cool detail. Halibel is teaching Rigel shinobi techniques.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's doing that behind Subaru's back.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And he's like, yes, nephew. One day you will be the one that replaces me.
You know, Rigel also has a horn, so that's nice. I mean, like,
He
Yeah.
does have one horn, and he's super proud of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Don't they both? Spica has one too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
like
obviously
Rigel is the one who like has the conversation about like I'm not mad at you for only giving me one horn. I'm glad
Yeah.
I got this
Yeah.
from you. It's really cool. I wish you would stop letting Dad stroke it when I'm in front of you. It's weird.
When we this is so horny, but basically, like, the idea is Yeah, I'm not talking. I'm not gonna talk.
Finally, this is the fucking talk I wanted to have. Let's get back on it.
Yeah, like there is. I'm not saying this because I don't know. I'm like, Tepe, is there some things that you want to talk about with like bisexuality that you have or something? Because it feels like it very often. You know, there's a lot of like gay stuff in the story where I'm like, what the heck's going on? But yeah, we'll get to that eventually in later points.
He loves horns. He just wants to grab onto them and.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing that I kind of want to talk about with this is that the story ends very satisfactorily, and I want to know what you guys think about the way that everything's just all right, because I'm like, at one point there's sort of supposed to be this idea that the main story is the best possible outcome. We want that, right? The reason why it's the best possible outcome might not be because everything is happy, right? It doesn't have to be the happiest outcome, but perhaps it's supposed to be the right outcome. And how do you balance that narratively, right? Because you read the story and you come out of it being like, if I read the story and I didn't read the rest of the book, I'm like, well, I'm happy Subaru finally got a happy ending, right? And maybe you don't really have to think too much about like the bad stuff that does eventually happen to Subaru in the main story. But like, does it cheapen if there is a different outcome in the main story where it's like sort of happy, sort of not happy? Or is this supposed to be a love letter to these characters?
I think it's.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go first, please.
Okay. I am honestly so conflicted at this point after reading it. Like, I love the main plot of ReZero, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan. I'm sure once I start reading again, I'll be fine, or watch the anime, whatever comes first. But right now, I am so, like, I'm okay with the sloth route. Like, it would be a terrible story, sure, if he ended it there. But I'm kind of happy in that bliss after all the suffering I've read. I mean, I'm just barely past chapter 15 of Arc 6. I've seen Sufferu so far. Probably not his worst yet, but it's pretty up there. So, like, seeing this time where, he's not necessarily saving Amelia like he promises at the beginning. It's a very slothful path considering, like, what is promised, what is the premise of the show. But at the same time, I am quite content with this outcome, and I honestly don't want to read any more ifs because I know it's going to be really sad and depressing. I know it's probably going to be very good storytelling, but I am kind of enjoying this bliss.
For me, I have to remind myself that I got to put myself in Tape's shoes for writing this story and realize that this, for me, Connor, and for you, Kyles, this ends how we would want it to end.
Oh,
Subaru's living with Rem happily with 2 great kids and has the perfect life.
Yeah.
But for Tape, his best girl lost.
That is true.
Like,
that is a very
forgotten.
Yeah. Which also surprised me in this route. Like, Amelia just no thought. No thought at all. I know she just broke up with him theoretically, or like it was really ended things with their relationship of sorts. Friendship. Acquaintanceship. Whatever the fuck it was at that time. But still, I know they're repressing, but
the other important thing to note here is that Subaru is avoiding the grander destiny this world has set out for him.
Yeah.
Like, he is avoiding something that's almost like a battle with fate, as he describes in the main story. Mm-hmm. He is choosing to avoid these things that are calling to him. It's like, how in a lot of stories, like the hero's journey, like the call to action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Bilbo didn't go on the quest.
This is literally Bilbo didn't go on the quest.
And that's the reason why it's Sloth, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And not that they don't, because in this story they actually do resolve, and I think that's a nice balance to strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
He actually resolves a lot of Subaru's traumas in this arc, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it's Sloth is because he doesn't adventure to do more than he could, right? Because Subaru's capable of, in the main story we see Subaru's capable of so much great stuff that he doesn't do because he has a simple life. It's not that it's bad. It's not that he's not happy. It's not that he doesn't live a good life and help people out that he cares about, has a good family. It's the fact that he was capable of doing so much more and he didn't. He kind of discarded that responsibility. And it makes me wonder if there's going to be a point in the story where Tepe is kind of subliminally telling you, being like, hey, it's fine to take a path that is easy and simple and live a simple life. But I know that a lot of my readers, perhaps, or even me, I felt like I was capable of doing so much more than living a simple life as a
Mhm.
butcher or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I,
This
and
is
that he would have been
also
fine with that life, but it's just like he realized that he could have done so much more.
Mhm.
this is also kind of the fantasy that the existence of ReZero kind of spits in the face of more often than not, where
Mhm.
Subaru's internal conflicts, his issues with his parents, his issues with being like a responsible or diligent or greedy person are overcome here because he has like the most amazing woman ever at his side helping him through all of it while he gets to
Mhm.
help her through her own issues too,
You
which
know what
is
it
just
honestly feels like? It feels
that's
like
a fantasy.
the luckiest break. It feels, yeah, you're right. It feels like the most
Mhm.
isekai, but also luckiest break the character could get, where it's like everything went right so well. He met the strongest person who was also the nicest person that he could have met. He got a good job. He met a powerful, wind spirit
He
who kind of
adopted a
resolved.
powerful wind spirit.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
adopted a
really
powerful
did.
wind spirit, the great spirit of wind, who's been ancient from time immemorial, who kind of helped them defeat the person who was going to kill the nearest witch cult member, who happened to have been him at the time, right? And Halbel, with Halbel there, Subaru can never die in this, life, pretty much, like that's sort of the vibe. Or Zarestia now too. Like Zarestia will always be there to protect his kids. That's how the story ends. It's like Zarestia, the Great Spirit of Wind, will always be there to protect the Natsuki family, and they're fine forever.
Yeah,
Is how
and
the story
Zarestia
ends.
and Halibal are training Rigel, who is now like the only male Oni known in the world, and probably getting that same wind power that Rom had, and is going to
Mhm.
eventually become the most dangerous person in this planet has ever
Yeah,
seen.
the strongest person
Yeah.
after Halibel. Halibel taught by the strongest person in the Kararagi City States as a ninja, is an Oni, has probably sane wind magic, taught
He
by
could
Zarestia or just like
contract to
Zarestia.
Zarestia and
Yeah,
become a
contract to
wind
Zarestia.
spirit arts user of ridiculous levels.
That would be
Now,
Like
crazy. This is
the future
why.
for Rigel is
This
bright.
is why he didn't allow this to happen. He made another OP character. Couldn't happen. Couldn't top Reinhardt.
I think the important thing to note here is also, right, like, Tapei is basically saying here, like, I think he's almost speaking to his readers, because a lot of his message from ReZero, especially of what his message with Subaru is a lot of people let go of their potential because of their own insecurities, because of
Mm.
the own things that hold themselves back. And this is true for a lot of characters in the story, where it's not them being a weak person, it's them holding themselves back. Just because Subaru is a weak combatant doesn't mean he's not strong in other areas that are insanely useful and good.
Mhm.
But what he's saying here is, it's not a sin to live a simple life and be happy. But if you also want to lead to greater ambition, don't hold yourself back because of your own insecurities, right? Like, it's almost
Mhm.
as if saying, there's nothing wrong with living a simple life. Just make sure, are you coming to terms with the fact that you're okay with not living through to your fullest?
Yeah. I feel like the SlothIF is the most relatable to like anyone. Like a lot of us, we just want to settle down, just live life, go through it, and just not have to think of anything else, really. Forget
Yeah,
all the
there's
stuff that you put aside and wanted to set up and do, and then you just pick the easier path of picking someone to live with and settling in.
They
This
also
might be a bit of an age thing with us too, Kyle's, where we're getting
Oh,
closer to
what?
like that point where
Yeah,
that's set and ready, and not everyone who reads ReZero is.
that's
Yeah.
true. That is true. Where when I read this, I was like, oh my god, that's terrifying. That is where my body is at and is like freaking out about as I push 30. It's like, why aren't you here yet? What's wrong with you? What is happening to you? Why are you so shit? When in reality, everyone does their own shit.
Well,
But
it's one of those things
internally-
where- oh, for some reason my
Yeah,
was
I was
down.
like, where'd you go?
Yeah.
where you at?
Somehow I turned down my mic like by 3 decibels. Anyway, so the idea is that yeah, I think what he's trying to say is that, like, hey, if you're at this point in your life where you feel like you can't go on a grand adventure to actualize yourself, you still can live a fulfilling life besides that. I think
Yes.
Teppei wants his readers to understand that impression. He doesn't want them to be like, hey, I mean, I'm surprised he's able to help himself being like, I want to write a happy story for these characters, even if I prefer a different story, right? He's like,
Yeah.
and that's an impressive thing. It's a lot of empathy for an author to really convey to his readers, being like, I know you guys love Rem. I know you guys love these people. I don't love her as much as you guys do, but I'm going to try to give them the most happy life ever and show you how you could live a happy life too.
Mhm.
You can have a nice nice relationship with your neighbor. You can have a nice relationship with, people that you meet just happen by. You can have a nice family that aspires to be grateful. You can go past your own familial trauma and live
Mhm.
a normal life doing maybe not what you preferred to do. Like, I don't think Subaru preferred to be a maid at a mansion or whatever. I don't necessarily think that Rem, maybe she wants to be a teacher, but maybe it wasn't the way that she kind of
Yeah.
envisioned it to be. But like, I think that's it's a very wholesome story in that way.
In their situation, they had to do it, had to be done, starting in somewhere from literally zero. It's like a very aggressively slice of life, because literally any time that there's something big that happens that could change their life, Subaru immediately goes, oh shit, I gotta go to work to make money to go buy groceries because we don't have enough money to eat tonight.
Right.
So I gotta go back to work. Even though this thing in like entity could come kill me and ruin everything. Yeah, I gotta go to work, guy. Bye.
Yeah,
That's
my wife's
for real.
pregnant
That's what
and
I'm
there's-
feeling.
My wife's pregnant. There's a killer after us right now, but I haven't called off work yet and have to go and deal with that
Yeah.
for us both.
I can't
That's
lose my
awesome.
job. If I live, I fucked.
It's the
I
last
feel like
one.
that.
I think this is also like for me a really cool thing that isekai like could capture but never has captured, that I think Teppei has done a really good job of.
Mhm.
And I mean this specifically for my situation. I am an immigrant,
Mhm.
and I know what it feels like to go to a place that you've never even really seen properly before, and to try and live there and start anew. And I think this story does a really good job of capturing the anxieties that come with like setting up in a new area, but also like the rewardingness of trying to come to a community that welcomes you, and like
Yeah.
you build your roots in that way, right? Like it's a really fulfilling and beautiful thing.
Well, when they welcome you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Key words.
Shout out
But-
to Canada.
Yeah.
But a big thing I wanted to mention here is that is not these ideas aren't necessarily in opposition to the main story. I
Mhm.
think another thing Teppei may be trying to say with this comparison to the main story is that in a lot of ways, Subaru is having these relationships in the story anyway, like with Beatrice, with Amelia,
Yeah, absolutely.
with and
Mhm.
I think he's also trying to say, like, if you want to pursue greater ambitions, you can still have this familial life and these strong bonds and this community and friendship too.
Mhm.
Like, you don't have to forsake that to reach these greater heights either, which I
Yeah.
think is a really cool way to validate like
Yeah.
any person at any point in their life.
It does make
And
me very hopeful for the end game of ReZero. I'm still rooting for Amelia and Subaru, of course, later on. But I'm rooting for the fact that Teppei actually writes him a little happy ending and gives him something good, not just death.
This ending kind of convinces me that I'm not sure exactly how or who, but I'm like, there is a non-zero chance that Subaru has these children.
So I didn't want to be the first one to say it because I know this is one of the opinions that can get like actual hate thrown at in the ReZero community. Whereas you might still be rooting for him to be with Amelia at Kyle's, I'm genuinely rooting for the polyamory ending between these three.
At
Okay,
this point,
Wolf was telling me today about polyamory being like chill in ReZero. Honestly, if I was Amelia and I've kind of gotten to her mental state enough with voice acting, I would. Absolutely.
well, you know
Both.
what?
Both of them? Yes.
It's not even like
Please.
that. I've always gotten hints, and this is not even just me being like, well, blah blah blah. But I've always gotten hints that when Amelia talks about Rem or like is hanging out with Rem, there is like a subtle attraction there. Like,
There are
absolutely.
such gay hints. I'm here for it. I've
Have
read
you
the
seen
fan
Memory
fiction.
Snow OVA?
I
Like,
love
that's what I
that
mean,
one.
yeah.
It is literally my Discord bio thing. I'm pretty sure it's still up.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the Rem And Amelia's situation is one that the main story hasn't given the opportunity for those two to be alone in a scene together yet.
I want it so
It'll
bad.
happen. It'll happen, and when
I
it
want it
happens, it's
so
going to be
bad.
important. I think like Rem and Amelia's relationship developing further is something that has to occur. And when it does happen, it's going to be like a big overarching part of the story, I think.
I don't think
Right.
you'll understand the amount of money I would put into a
The-
body pillow with both of them on it.
One thing to note, off the top of my head, the only time there's been a scene alone together between Rem and Amelia is when Subaru has crashed with Amelia at that point near the end of Arc 2, where he's like overworking himself and projecting himself too much and he just makes himself sick. And that is the moment where Amelia tries to start slowly convincing Rem that Subaru is a good boy. But the first time we see them alone together is surrounding their relationships towards Subaru.
Mhm.
So I think that's a general hint towards where that's going to go. And I know I always bring this up, but back to that lost episode, EX1. Culturally in this world, polyamory and like the way sexuality is viewed is I've understood differently, I think, in this world than in our world, right?
Right. So part of that is a concept that we just don't get with Western written Western fantasy.
Mm.
So part of it is in medieval East Asian points, the concept of your ruler, like your king, your prince, etc., being explicitly monogamous was so rare. There's only one Chinese emperor ever who did it.
Right? Yeah, they had like
Like
a
he's
What a
million
famous
homie.
for not having concubines.
Good for him.
So the idea of having more than one girl with the protagonist in a Western themed, Eastern written fantasy, like
Mm.
most isekai are, is rooted in more Eastern culture and concepts of that time period.
Yeah.
So it's not as unusual. Like Regulus had what, 100 wives or whatever?
Didn't fuck a
It's-
single one of them. Good for him.
Yeah, but the point is that was still like established and brought into that. Roswell is implied to have been quote unquote with both of the maids, even though we know that's not true. But that's like Subaru's assumption for what's
Well, at least
going
one
on
of them.
as a noble.
At least one.
It's a
see-
concept. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
If Teppei does it, he's being a real G. He gets the girl he's always wanted, and he gives us the fan favorite.
Well,
Mhm.
Everyone
also-
would fight me for that one.
It's also a thing of I feel in a lot of these harem type stories, right, where the protagonist has multiple people that he's interested in or like in a relationship in. A lot of the time, it's not actually converted into what you'd understand a relationship in real life like that.
Right.
With
The
like
relationship doesn't feel naturally progressed, or the relationships between the two people that are being, objects of polyamory are sort of dissonant to a point where I'm like, well, this doesn't really make sense for
and
them
like
to
and
stick
again,
around.
like what is
It's like
their
he's in
relationship
6
between each
monogamous
other?
relationships.
Yeah,
Too lustif.
but that's not how a relationship like that it works. Like, what's the dynamic between the two other like people in this polyamorous relationship? I think that is something ReZero is probably going to explore in the later parts of the story.
Yeah,
is what I
100%.
would imagine. And I'm not offended by that concept. I think
I hope
If
it's an
Teppei
equal
has-
three-way.
Well,
I think they
yeah.
has shown the writing chops to make it work, and I think it feels appropriate for the story.
Valid.
In a way, I think like the big challenge has already been overcome, which is write these characters like their relationship could be natural or human, right? In which I feel a lot better about the relationship because the relationship seems equal in this arc, right? In this if, right?
Mhm.
It
Like-
shows the way that the relationship is destined to evolve into.
Right. So if that can form, right, and I'm like, there's no like way that this relationship has to be based on just the two of them in the form that it is. You know what I mean? They're happy in the situation that they're in, but it's not like it's because it's exclusive or anything like that. It can still be that way, and we know that Rem is fine with being his number two, right? So And
Yes.
Yeah, she's already
said it.
proposed that situation to him in arc 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I will be the other woman. It's okay.
Subaru isn't the one that proposes that either, which is also a rarity in these type of stories.
Yeah, it's Rem who's saying like, "Hey, I love you enough that I'm willing to be with you even if you are also with Amelia. Like if I will work it out with her."
And it's cool too because Amelia and Rem, like they're separate personalities. They have different things that make them, people that are good or attractive or any of those like terms you could use for these sort of relationships. But Amelia is like good at things that Rem is not at, and bad at things that Rem is good at. They make a really good play off of each other, where Amelia's terrible at housework and chores and cooking and like very menial things like that, but Amelia's very good at like taking charge and going towards goals, and when she's not inhibited by herself, she's able to like go for grander things, right? So
It's
in the
also-
main story, it would almost be like if this was to work out this way, Rem would be like very much the person that grounds them and makes a happy, loving family. Amelia would be the one that soars to greater heights.
It's also they have a different but equally important relationship with Subaru, where
Yes.
Amelia is the one that inspires him to be like, she is who I want to be the best version of me for, because he wants to live up to like the vision he has of who should be with Amelia. But Rem is the one he confides in that he knows he's not, and she's the one that can get him to keep going regardless. And he doesn't want to let that down either. So it's two equally important relationships for that, for him improving as a person and getting to build those relationships up and form up. And I don't think it's a total coincidence that as soon as Rem is removed from memory and name and everything, and he does finally kiss Amelia, that the time that she is now unconscious, like the time passes, but Amelia is also not able to continue that relationship with him in the meantime
because
either.
that part is missing.
Yeah, you're right. One of the things that I kind of was thinking about is, I know this is not because I'm a fan of Rem or anything like that. I know Tapei loves Amelia, but I remember I was thinking about this, and this convinced me of something, and I'm not too sure about it, but it's like, in the main story, does the story have to end with him with Amelia? Like,
I don't think
is
it
it
does.
really that? Yeah, it doesn't have to, right? But like, even if she's the heroine, even if she has to do whatever, like, is their relationship? Well, we might see them have a better dynamic later on, right? That makes more sense. But I feel like it's too much like a knight and his queen rather than like people in equal relationships, you know?
I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, if Amelia becomes queen, I don't see Subaru being king consort no matter what. Like, that's just not an ending that I see for him. On a council of wise men, sure. Alone in like a tower being an awesome counselor and wise man, absolutely. Just her personal knight, sure. But like the actual king consort next to her doesn't feel like that's where his character is going.
And that's the thing that's like fascinates me, because I'm like, the relationship dynamic is uneven, but it's also one of the things where it's like, we know their age and their like intelligence gaps, whatever. Subaru has a lot of growth to do, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finds out or investigates within himself that his love of Amelia isn't necessarily necessitated on whether or not they get together or have children or whatever. You know, like the I do wonder about that. It might still happen, because I know that, you know, Tapei loves Amelia, and maybe he writes it in a natural way that makes it work if she doesn't become the queen or whatever. But like, the truth is, I do wonder that, and yeah, it could just be him with Rem. And I'm not saying that because I like Rem super much, right? Like so much that I'm like, oh, it has to be Rem or anything like that. But I'm like, at this point, it just feels more natural if that were the case.
I will also make the point of, I won't completely disavow the tiny potential that Subaru could maybe grow into a person as a king consort. I don't think that's where the story's going to go. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't even think Amelia's going to win the selection, personally. So I don't see that being the way it turns out, but I won't disavow that as a possibility, if that makes sense, depending on how the story goes. Especially with how I'm viewing Subaru currently, where I'm at in the story, I can see a lot of potential different paths. What I will say though is this was a really fun read overall. Really tickled a lot of world building and slice of life stuff that you don't sometimes get in the main story, which was really nice. But also mirrored the main story in a lot of ways that was really cool. I think one thing I will note here, before we kind of like wrap up with like overall thoughts, is I do not think, right, like, because Subaru overcomes a lot of his problems in this story, and he grows as a person, but I don't think he actualizes himself. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't become the Natsuki Subaru he's meant to be. He becomes the Natsuki Subaru that's content and happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it totally does.
That's what I meant by that being the sloth part of it. It's like he could have aspired to do so much more, and he didn't. And that's the thing, right? Like, ReZero's a part about fate, right? Like, there is sort of a fated line that you're supposed to walk. We've talked about this before, and it's like these guys have this path that they're supposed to walk, and Subaru is obviously going off that path in this story. The world isn't collapsing around him, but the fact is, this is something I want to bring up. If Subaru dies at an old age, he's just going to come back to the Appa vendor.
Yeah.
In this world, even if he dies surrounded by, children of Rem, like his children, whatever, and whatnot, it's all going to be lost as soon as he dies.
Wait, are you serious? Holy shit!
Apparently, that is what Tapea said in a Q&A. I can't find the actual transcript for that, but that's been like repeated and mentioned several times.
It's just like that game.
Yeah, Satella wouldn't be like, I'm updating the checkpoint here because she's like, no, you're on the wrong path. This isn't the path that I chose for you. So as soon as that he does die, it'll just be right back to the real story.
Unless he chooses the right path.
Well, it could also be a thing of like, I think that would fuck up Subaru. I would be so fucked up.
That would be the most horrific death possible because that would mean his kids are permanently gone.
Yeah.
You can't.
He's never going to have those children. Like,
and it can't even just be he has has sex the exact same amount of times, because the probability of those kids being born again are infinitely zero.
Yeah,
they're gone.
And the thing is, right? I was wondering about this. And this might be a darker thing at one of the last arcs. If Subaru goes down a path and hasn't yet killed Satella or whatever, and he's living out this life, I wouldn't be surprised if Tapei pulls a moment where he's like, they live happy ever after, they have children, Subaru dies somehow, and he's lost all that, and then he has to confront.
Yeah, it's gonna end up with the Apple Man every single time.
No, it's not the Apple Man. It's gonna be like he has to confront okay, now I actually have to go kill Satella. I thought I lived happily ever after, but I actually do have to kill her, or something like that. I think that's going to happen, but
he tries to loophole out of killing Satella, and it just makes him restart the whole process again.
And he's like, I'm gonna do whatever, and then he has to confront no, I actually do have to put her down and embody last sin inside myself fully, or whatever.
Damn.
I think I could see going a different direction. Subaru being the obviously he wants to live a happy ever after. But if he has this connection with this person, I don't think he would trade that in over his own life. I could see him doing a sacrificial thing where he somehow takes it from her in a way that wouldn't involve killing.
We talked about we talked about the ending of the story, and I was like, I'm not sure it's going to be a happy ending.
Yeah.
I'm just
turns
hopeful.
Satella into a kid, sends her back in time, and it's Amelia sort of thing.
Dun dun dun. But I think we're getting a bit too crackpotty at this point.
Yeah,
it's 3:30 a.m.
This story is about having a lovely family and teasing your son. That's all the story is about.
Tease your son till he hates you and runs away. That didn't happen, but it almost feels like it will.
But please let us know what you felt about the episode and the ifs themselves in the comments below. Let us know what you think, because we like to read them. Trust us, all of us read it, all over. We may not all immediately respond, but we love reading them.
And if you talk shit about our VAs, I slam you in the chat.
Thank you for joining us today, Kyles, too.
Yes,
I know this is one you wanted to be on, and I'm glad you got to be here and squirm over Rem with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad there's two of us.
If you were interested, which I'm sure you are, because come on, it's the ReZero podcast.
Duh.
You are more than invited to guest as many times as you want for specific podcasts that you find
It's not like I'm the manager or anything. I can
Thanks
force
for
my
collabing
way.
with us.
Yeah, of course.
Where can we find you?
Yeah.
At Volcanica VT, because I'm so fucking creative. And that's it. And here on Reverie, 24/7, baby. I'll probably be back for the EX1 novel when you guys redo that video, just to make it a little different.
We need to have a way to have the discussion again without
Yes.
just repeating all of our lines.
And we need it to be organic, too. We can't force it.
Maybe
We'll
I'll be Krush.
We'll probably hit EX1, 4, and 5 after we finish Arc 7.
Yes, that's the goal, I think.
I'm going to try to catch up. Because I keep getting spoiled on Twitter every fucking day of my life.
Yeah.
It looks pretty fucking hype.
Because I think the story's heading really fast all of a sudden, and I'm just like, okay, well, he keeps on writing, so we just have to catch up.
So for those who don't know, there was a bit of a break in between podcasts just because like there was just a thing of like we had to slowly edit stuff out and get content out in the right way, and we had a backlog for a while. And the place where we stopped at in Arc 7, for anyone that's still watching and is interested in the Arc 7 coverage stuff, we felt it was a good place to stop for a little bit because there's a lot of informational overload, and we thought it'd be a good place to have a break. But now we'll be getting back into some of the Arc 7 analysis.
Yeah.
And trying to wrap that up and catch up to the story as quickly as we bloody can.
Oh my god, Arc 9.
Oh my god. Like, I am somehow avoiding so many spoilers, and I don't know how long my luck is going to last, man.
Because you both got it off of Twitter. That's why. That is why.
Well, at this point, only Wolf here is completely free of the big Arc 8 spoiler that the rest of us have gotten hit with.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep it that way and race ahead. So look forward to more Arc 7
into the
podcasts these coming weeks.
And when I finish Arc 6, maybe I'll convince you guys to talk Arc 6 with me.
Oh,
absolutely.
We do one big Arc 6 talk.
Yeah. Maybe an Arc 5 one, too, at the end of 81.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, yeah, after we do our finale, we can do a podcast
The
about Arc 5
finale!
in general, yeah.
All of Arc 5. Caught up, yeah. Bye!
Everyone that's watching has a wonderful day or evening wherever they are. Goodbye!